The story begins with the familiar sight of a curtain through the window, with warm sunlight gently streaming into the room. Sitting on the bed, the young man woke up feeling down. His name was Corin Locke, and he suddenly opened his red eyes wide as he noticed something. What caught his attention was the view of an extravagant, luxurious mansion. He realized he was in the game he had been playing earlier. 3 years ago, he had bought a role-playing game called Asterisk, Heroic Legend of Ardan Asterisk. The game was set in an academy where countless dangerous events constantly unfolded. Despite the world's impending apocalypse, the story continued on. Looking back, he figured it didn't matter. With a carefree expression, he thought the protagonist would take care of everything. He, on the other hand, was just there to fill in space. He played the role of an NPC in a beginner quest, where the protagonist would save all the villagers. If things follow the storyline, everything will be solved quickly, he thought. He stepped out onto the street and started looking for the main character. That person's name was Park Sidu, and he would soon become famous and rich. As he was walking, he noticed a young man sitting angrily by the side of the road. The word sprite that the man was muttering to himself did make sense. This thing wasn't even part of the game. Park Sidu cupped half of his face in his hands and said aloud, "I just have to live for myself. That's all there is to it." Hearing this, the other man quickly grabbed his hand and excitedly said, "Hey, I feel the same way." Park Sihu was also a player of this role-playing game. The difference between the two was that Park Sihu had been granted the privilege of having a player stats window. The problem was he had never played this game before, but he was going to make up for that. At that moment, Corin Locke smiled confidently, threw his arm around Park Sihu's shoulder and said, "Hey, you said you wanted to be a mage, right? Well, you'll need to level up your wisdom stats, and there will be a skill book in the next chapter. That's really important, so don't forget." He knew this because he had already completed every chapter of the game and knew all the paths that needed to be taken. All Park Sihu had to do was trust him. After all, he was an expert at this heroic Legend of Ardan game. He confidently stated, "As long as I'm your strategist, that's already the luckiest thing that will ever happen to you." While they were talking, a monster appeared behind them. He glanced over his shoulder, and in the blink of an eye, Sihu had sliced the monster's head off. After dealing with it, Sihu turned back, smiling brightly, and asked, "Are you okay?" They have all the game information, and Sihu had a stats window and player system. With that combination, the two of them made the perfect team. He was sure that as long as Sihu was by his side, they could save many people, prevent the apocalypse, and then return to their world. That day, Sihu handed him a vial of medicine and said it was like a health potion. Without hesitation, Corin Locke drank it. However, there was still one thing that disappointed him about this place. It was full of men, and there was nothing interesting about it. The appeal of this game lay in its fantasy elements, along with the variety of hero legends and fantasy romance. Park Sihu had no connections with any women, only adding them to the team when necessary. Eventually, there would be nothing left but camaraderie, and it made him feel bored to the point where he didn't even want to talk anymore. There's one more thing I should have realized sooner. When the Sword Emperor's granddaughter died on her way to the memorial, and with the final boss of the first level gone, Marietti disappeared. These mysterious deaths and disappearances were never part of the original storyline of the game. What's even more important is Park Sihu's way of thinking. According to his comments, the guy's personality is hard to read. He's starting to feel a bit of regret, realizing he should have been more suspicious of him. Marietti Dudalev is a hero in this game, but neither you nor I have ever met her. Because she disappeared, he was really puzzled, wondering why on earth is her magic staff here. It was then that he furrowed his brow, finally realizing, so that bastard's been sneaking off somewhere every night, and that's why I ended up following him all the way here. But how could there be a place like this underground? It's almost like this is his personal storage room. The hidden Ododachi fragment, it's the same item that went missing when another hero, Alicia, disappeared. And it's not just this. There's also Jadra's hammer, Lark's spellbook, and other items from the characters who vanished during my time playing this game. And it didn't stop there. In front of him was the lifeless body of a young woman, submerged in a solution that prevented decay. He recognized her instantly. She was the missing person, Mariette Dunalev. Before he could process what he was seeing, Siku suddenly appeared behind him. He covered one side of his face, giving off a sinister look, and asked, "What are you doing here?" Corin Locke quickly responded, "What is going on here? You said you were chasing after Mariette and lost track of her." Siu casually answered, "Well, she's a demon after all. Do you really want to waste the blood of a high-ranking vampire? I'm just using it the right way." Siu grinned maliciously before adding, "And you've had a taste of it too." Those words sent a chill through Corin Locke, and he suddenly remembered drinking the potion Siu had given him earlier without thinking twice. He quickly covered his mouth, stunned by the realization. He dropped to his knees, clutching his face as if he couldn't believe what was happening. Siu looked at him and continued, "What's wrong?" "I worked hard to make this place. I captured her and built this room in just a month. Korin gritted his teeth in anger and demanded, why? Why did you do this? Sihu calmly explained, of course, it's to finish the main story more effectively. Your way of playing is way too exhausting. You keep trying to save people and end up losing. Why not just kill Lark and Javier already? You're always trying to protect those we can't control, no matter how much you raise your friendship points with them. It's better to use them like this. Listen up, I'm way better at this than you. At that moment, he realized that from the start, Sihu had been lying to him. The bastard wasn't a newbie after all. Still looking down at the ground, he asked, how many times have you done this? Sihu stared at him and said, I don't really know, let me think. If I kill 3 more, that will make it 100,000. He was furious, his teeth gritted and his eyes bloodshot. This guy wasn't even human anymore. Enraged, he stood up, grabbed Sihu by the collar, and screamed, monster. Sihu, still calm, replied, wake up. They're just NPCs. You've killed a few yourself, haven't you? His anger flared even more, and he shouted in Sihu's face, the ones I killed were nothing but mindless monsters. They were trying to wipe out the world. What do you mean by effective methods? You're disappointing me so much. If you're so obsessed with efficiency, why the hell did you even get the Odachi? And why does a mage need the Knight's Shard? Korin Locke slammed Sihu into the wall and yelled, so what if you use a few regular bottles of medicine? You can create them easily through the character window. What the hell did you even make this crazy place for? In response to his angry words, Sihu just sneered. You're unbelievable. That his eyes grew cold, empty, almost demonic. Do you need me to explain again how you're just trying to fix society's failures with the stupid sense of balance you have? After saying that, Sihu grabbed Korin's head and violently slammed him into the wall. Blood trickled down the wall in long streaks from Korin. He looked like he was in excruciating pain, and it was hard to tell if he was even conscious anymore. Sihu stepped closer to him, grinding his teeth in frustration. You drive me crazy. After everything I've done for you, don't you dare speak to me like that. All I've been thinking about is you. I should be the reason you're alive, the center of your world. I am your world. Yet you, with your worthless obsession over those useless NPCs, keep sticking your nose in things that don't concern you. I'm done holding back. At his harsh words, Korin Locke could only stay silent, completely confused, unable to understand what he was saying. It felt like there were 1,000 question marks in his head. I don't get what this jerk is talking about anymore. Then he struggled to speak, trying to come up with his own explanation. You're not that kind of person, right? We've been through 199 chapters together. Why the sudden genre change? Suddenly, Sihu stepped closer to him, exuding an intense killing aura. I've removed every obstacle in our way, all for our future. To his surprise, the words sounded like a violent confession of love. That's when Korin Locke finally understood what was going on and couldn't hold back, shouting back at him, you bastard. The only reason our team is all men is because Sihu, thinking the others were just for show, casually replied, don't worry about them. The only person I love is you. But right after confessing, Sihu got a loving punch straight from Korin Locke. Korin quickly turned away, too afraid to say anything more, his mind racing. This twisted bastard, I'm terrified. I don't even have a girlfriend. I'm still a virgin. However, something like a vine started chasing after him, wrapping around his legs and grabbing his shoes. Before he knew it, it lifted him off the ground, leaving him stunned. All he could do was scream in shock at what was happening. Sihu stepped closer and said, you can't escape from me. I'll bind you forever. You have to be mine. In this fake world, you're the only real thing. Korin Locke could only scream and curse in helplessness. You're scaring the crap out of me, bastard. Sihu formed a seal in his hand and smirked. It'll all be over soon. Once it's finished, we'll be together forever. This is the first time I've seen a story with a plot like this. The scene shifted to a vast, endless beach, and Korin Locke's voice echoed. So this was Park Sihu's scheme all along. It's starting now. Once it takes out the final boss, then, damn it. I don't even want to think about what's going to happen to me next. A system alert appeared. Player has died. Mission failed. He was floating in the endless waves of the ocean, thinking that bastard had lost. The scene then shifted back to the familiar curtain by his window. He jolted awake in panic, as if coming out of a bad dream. He sat up, still shaken, his mind racing. He looked out the window, seeing the same familiar view. He felt a deep sense of regret. 3 years ago, when he first arrived here, everything was so different. His hands were clenched tight, a sign of his helplessness. He gritted his teeth, bit his lip, and tears began to fall. During the Roten River Dam collapse, while on a mission to deal with river monsters, the dam suddenly broke and swept away an entire village. Thousands of water monsters and innocent people drowned. It was a horrifying scene, yet Park Sihu had the audacity to laugh like he'd never laughed before. To him, it was the most amazing thing. At that moment, he felt something was wrong, but he couldn't understand why this vile man seemed so pleased. Looking back now, it was clear. Despite the thousands who died, the only thing Park cared about was the experience points he gained from it. He truly was a monster, heartless and cruel, responsible for the deaths of 100,000 people. Right now, he thought he could stop him. Park Si-hoo was only level 5, just like him. All the factors that made players stronger were at Merkaba Academy. Since joining, Park had grown much stronger. He wasn't a monster yet, but who knew how fast he would develop after starting at the academy. He had only 5 days left to prepare as the entrance ceremony was approaching. He rushed into the forest and grabbed a mushroom. In other words, the only way to kill Si-hoo was right now. The first mission, the truck heading to the city of Merkaba, had been ambushed by monsters in the forest, and the guards had to protect everyone until it could be repaired. The scene shifts to 2 players standing in the forest. They had just caught a small monster and were thrilled. The one who killed the monster was none other than Park Si-hoo. He was still completely carefree. The old man who was with the truck called out to them, "Sir Leon, Miss Laura, the vehicle is ready." The 3 of them happily walked toward the truck. Suddenly, a loud noise behind them made them panic and look back. Before they could understand what was happening, they saw a tree branch flying toward them at an incredibly fast speed. Leon quickly pushed Laura out of the way of the branch. Luckily, at the last moment, the branch slammed into the ground. The 2 of them raised their swords, ready to fight whatever was ahead of them. It turned out that the roar and the flying branch came from a level 2 werewolf. It kept growling, showing off its power. He stood somewhere nearby, hearing the screams, gritting his teeth, and cursing, "Damn it, has it already started?" Despite running at full speed, he couldn't stop it. He just wished he had more time to prepare. Meanwhile, Laura had already been attacked by the wolf, blood splattering everywhere. If only he had arrived earlier, he could have saved them. At that moment, Leon told Si-hoo, "Get in the car, I'll distract it for you." But Si-hoo didn't listen at all. He turned toward the car and told the people inside, "Go ahead, I'll follow you." The girl in the car called out to him, still trying to hold him back, but he said, "I won't leave them behind." When Si-hoo arrived, Leon was being strangled by the wolf, lifted high off the ground. He just stood there, sword raised, staring at the wolf in fear. He wanted to be sure before getting involved. This was Park Si-hoo. He was either the hero who would save the world or just another player like him. After a moment, Park Si-hoo stiffened, glaring at the wolf with burning eyes. "You're really big, aren't you?" The wolf kept standing there, howling loudly to intimidate everyone. Another girl stepped forward, raising her sword and preparing to strike, reminding him to duck. She immediately thrust the sword toward the wolf, but it raised its arm and blocked the strike. She was stunned to see that it had stopped her attack. Both of them gritted their teeth, glaring at the fierce wolf. Park Si-hoo's voice was cold as he spoke. "Step back. I'll take care of this." The second daughter of the Arden family, the one who wielded the odachi, one of the 6 king's swords, a key member of the team, and a highly influential figure, Elisa Arden. Behind her, someone held a sword and spoke with a forced smile. "I'm so scared. Even if this is just a training session, there are still hidden features." She barely had time to glance back. He stood behind her, his eyes cold and demonic, and with a swift movement, he struck her in the back, saying, "I've been waiting for this moment." When he saw this, he was frozen for a moment, then gritted his teeth in fury. "So it's still you, Si-hoo." Elisa couldn't understand what was happening and spun around, shocked, asking him, "Why? Why would you do this?" She was in pain, staring at him with a stunned expression, even more terrified than when facing the wolf. He stepped closer, smirking. "Sorry, I was so scared I slipped up." The wolf beside them was howling loudly in rage. Elisa only had time to glance at it. When it attacked her, she had to do everything she could to block the blow. If Elisa Arden were to die during this mission, it would get the odachi, and then it would be able to join Looney Arden's team, a legendary holy sword. Park Si-hoo watched, still uncertain, as Elisa continued to fight the wolf. She had been poisoned but wasn't dead yet, probably because she was an important NPC in her storyline. At that moment, Elisa was knocked back by the wolf's attack, stumbling a few steps. She released a wave of killing intent and reminded herself to stay calm, closing her eyes and focusing all her energy. Once she regained her composure, she opened her eyes wide. It was time for Elisa's ultimate move, Absolute Strike. The wolf, struck by the attack, howled in agony. Seeing this, his expression turned bitter. He thought, at this rate, she could probably kill the monster by herself. He raised his knife again, unwilling to let things go. He threw the knife straight at her. Without hesitation, Elisa used her sword to deflect it out of the air. Her gaze turned even colder now. She hissed, "You're not being careless, are you?" Right in front of her was the sharp-toothed mouth of the wolf, ready to tear into her. She raised her sword high and immediately drove it straight through its head with one clean motion. Blood splattered everywhere. As the wolf breathed its last, she collapsed to the ground. With her final breath, she whispered, Why? Why you? When he grabbed her sword, he was filled with joy. Here it is. I've got the Odachi. This can only be used with a special skill, though. So, what should I do now? Suddenly, it seemed like he remembered something. He shot her a twisted look. Right, killing NPCs gives experience points, doesn't it? With that, he turned and walked toward Elisa. Her eyes welled up with tears filled with sorrow. Under the bright moonlight, he grinned cruelly. Just before he could strike, something was thrown directly at his head. He quickly raised his hand to block it. When he saw the disgusting, slimy substance covering his face, he recoiled in disgust. Whoa, what the hell is this? He spun around, looking frantically, and yelled, Who did this? Which damn bastard threw that? Show yourself. But all he summoned were a few monster rabbits. The mushrooms he had picked earlier, called topanic mushrooms, were a favorite of forest monsters and covered in a thick, powdery coating. He looked at his own body and gritted his teeth, cursing under his breath. In the eyes of the monsters, Park Sihu was nothing more than a piece of tender meat covered in a special sauce. Right now, he was busy fighting off a few rabbits that were trying to eat him. But in that moment, he had pulled Elisa into another place. Thank God, she's still breathing. But when he saw the wolf in front of him, he was a bit surprised. He quickly used his knife to break off one of its fangs. This isn't over yet. He stepped forward, cursing, Damn it, who the hell are you? He clenched his fist tightly, his voice cold as he killed 3 horned rats in the blink of an eye. Otachi really is impressive, huh? When Sihu saw him, he looked completely stunned. He pointed his sword at him and asked, How did you get here? In his mind, he thought, Is this bastard missing his memory or something? If that's the case, even better. He grinned maliciously and said to him, Hey, you're gonna hurt yourself if you keep holding your sword like that. Sihu, confused, looked at his sword. At that moment, Korin Locke grabbed a handful of sand and charged forward, throwing it straight at Siu's eyes, catching him completely off guard. Immediately, he got caught off guard and muttered under his breath, You bastard. Then he swung his sword wildly at me, shouting, Die. From my perspective, this guy was clumsy with his sword, but at least he was fast. Still, he had the advantage physically, so I had no choice but to take a risk. With no other option, I threw a punch at him, but he quickly dodged it. In my hand, I gripped the wolf's fang I had picked up earlier. It might look simple, but if it pierced his throat, he'd be dead for sure. I kept thrusting the sharp fang from all angles, aiming for his neck. He had to grit his teeth and dodge each strike. As time went on, I got bolder and more forceful with my attacks. Maybe it was because he was caught off guard, but he just stood there, trying to block the hits. The moment that fang pierced him, I quickly followed up by driving a sharp blade into his shoulder. Siu screamed in pain, his voice echoing through the quiet forest. His eyes started to well up with tears, looking surprisingly pitiful. Korin raised his sword high, preparing to strike again. Faced with the tip of the sword, Siu gritted his teeth, trying to figure out how to fight back. The sharp fang in my hand stabbed straight through his hand, and just seeing it was enough to make anyone wince in pain. He tried his hardest to hold on, so much that his face was pressed right against his opponent's. Then he succeeded, driving the fang from his opponent's hand into his throat. He silently thanked his opponent's past life for everything. One thing was certain. Because of him, he had grown stronger. Even so, he didn't regret what he had done. After all, he had killed the seed of a monster. The system reported that Park Siu had died, and it was calculating the abnormalities occurring in the main storyline. It began to examine the alternate world of Korin Locke running tests, potential tests, thought tests, compatibility tests, and player log tests. It transferred the previous player's experience to the hero Korin Locke. It also converted the minimum backup resources for a collapsed storyline and the minimum stats. The backup player program was now running. Korin Locke and triple A-level knight, heir to the martial arts of the backup player, stared at the system in confusion. What did backup player even mean? Did this now mean he would have a stat window? He noticed some movement behind him. Turning around, he saw Elisa still unconscious on the ground. He quickly rushed over to lift her up and asked, Are you okay? She whispered weakly, I can't see anything. He kept asking her, You feel dizzy and can't smell anything, right? Your ears are ringing too, right? She asked him back, How do you know about this speech-slurring condition? He explained, It seems like it's because of the poison from the tree frog. At this stage, it's hard to create this poison without a combination window. If the combination level had been slightly higher, Elisa would have died instantly. That's a relief. He paused for a moment, then continued, but the werewolf's fangs are still embedded in her body. So, she's still in critical condition. We need to stop the bleeding and detoxify her quickly. Seeing him undoing the strings on his shirt, she panicked. He quickly reassured her, I'm not doing anything. I just need to stop the bleeding and detoxify you. But I'm worried she might bite her tongue, which could be fatal, so I'm trying to find something to. Then his eyes landed on the body lying on the ground. He seemed to be deep in thought, calculating something. After a moment, he took his arm and gently placed it in her mouth, saying, "Bite down on this chicken leg." Next, he took off his shirt, revealing his six-pack abs for everyone to see. He warned her, "It's going to hurt a lot, so bite down as hard as you can." He couldn't understand why he was back 3 years ago, but here he was, and he had managed to kill the person he had to. As for the people who had died in his past life, they were still alive now. A little while later, the forest fell completely silent. He had succeeded in saving one person, and to him, that was enough. With everything settled, he started a fire and began cooking something. He gently placed her by the fire and said, "Hang in there, I'm making the antidote. Don't worry, humans aren't that easy to kill." Though it was difficult, she still managed to ask, "Hero, please tell me your name." He placed a cloth on her forehead to help lower her fever and replied that she didn't need to know. "Just rest, don't overthink it. I'll wake you up when the antidote is ready." He knew that from now on, he had to operate in the shadows. The fewer people who knew about him, the better. For now, though, he needed to reassess the situation. The story of Asterisk, heroic legend of Arden Asterisk, true to its name, was a tale of a hero. As players dealt with various incidents at the Academy, they would become the hero who saves the world. The hero would slay countless monsters and defeat the final boss. Even a worthless guy like Park Sihu had to follow this storyline, because if the final boss wasn't defeated, the world would be doomed. But that guy was already dead, so who would take on that fate now? Right now, he was an A-ranked knight, a martial arts hero, and a backup player. Who else could do this job? Still, these damn people. If they wanted him to do it, they at least have to make it worth his while. The system window kept popping up, blocking his access. He sat there, feeling down, muttering to himself, "I become a backup player, but I can't even use the support tools meant for players. I was so excited and looking forward to this. But now, look at this. How am I supposed to accomplish anything in the future? Just relying on the memories from my past life isn't enough. I'll have to use outside factors beyond the system to help me finish this." After 3 years of hard training, he was no longer just an heir or a backup. As he thought, he focused his energy around the red flame. His eyes shone with confidence. Just as he had predicted, it worked. He would definitely survive. The magic he had learned in his past life was rune magic, ancient symbols that held power within duty, restraint, and oath. Known as the 3 command runes, they were one of the strongest laws that governed this world, a source of human power and the root of destruction. He bit the tip of his finger and carved the bloodstain onto his body. The first word among them was duty. This command increases the power of the person who casts the spell when they swear an oath to something. The oaths can be as simple as "don't eat chicken," but because they're too easy, they don't really add any significant points. Even though they're simple, he needed to swear something he could easily follow through on. "Who will not pretend to be blind and greedily covet the treasures of the good?" Duty. You will not pretend to be blind and greedily covet the treasures of the good. Your stats will increase when you complete this task. Failing to follow through will result in a 10-point penalty. The second word was restriction. He would not be aware of spirits. In this world, everything has some form of psychic ability. There are spirit bodies and ghosts without physical forms as well. Since spirit bodies can only interact through a mutual connection, they cannot use their powers to affect things without the ability to interact. If you fail to follow this, you will take 600% damage from the opponent's triggered restriction on crystals, 0% physical damage, and 50% other types of damage. As for the benefit of adhering to this rune, it would serve as a shield, protecting me from all other entities. And now, the last thing, the oath. In folklore, people use the power of an oath as a form of protection, but it comes with huge risks, even though the benefits can be significant. That's why both Park Sihu and I used it in our previous lives. However, even Park Sihu, who could use anything in the system, failed in front of the final boss, so I've got a lot to worry about myself. The heaviest oath will force us to save this world. That's the noble goal every warrior strives for. The most ambitious oath has completed the set of 3 runes. The oath's restrictions mean that all the runes will be applied to a reserve player. If the oath is not fulfilled, death is unavoidable. The next morning, Elisa opened her eyes and realized she was lying in bed in an unfamiliar place. She instinctively sat up, but her sudden movement aggravated her injury, and she cried out in pain. A nurse heard her and quickly came over to check on her. "Oh, you're awake? How are you feeling?" Elisa, curious, asked, "Where am I?" "You're at the Merkaba City Hospital." "Who brought me here?" The nurse smiled and replied, "Your family just left." "Just left." Seeing that Elisa seemed upset, the nurse quickly advised, "You can't move yet." "It's fine. Where's my stuff?" Elisa asked, looking around the room. When she spotted a backpack next to the bed, Elisa asked, "Is this the bag of the person who saved me?" Without waiting for the nurse's reply, she grabbed the bag and started checking inside. When she came across the belt, she frowned and muttered, "It's still got blood on it." Then she glanced at the nurse, her expression serious as she asked, "Is there anywhere I can buy honey candy?" The nurse helplessly reminded her, "Right now, you can only have soup. In 3 days, you'll have your initiation mission. Today is the opening ceremony of the Merkaba Academy." Corin was also on his way to the academy. As he took out his wallet to look for his student ID, he suddenly noticed an envelope tucked inside. "I don't remember putting this here," Corin thought, suspicious as he opened the envelope and read, "To my son, you have no idea how proud I am of you. Please be the protector of those around you." After reading it, Corin sighed and quietly said, "When did she put this in here?" Corin Locke was an ordinary, underachieving kid, but he did have a family. When he first arrived in this body, he acted awkward and distant, yet they still treated him the same way. And that was when he began to feel affection for his family and this world. That was the difference between Park Sihu and him. Since it's the first day of school, the entrance to Merkaba Academy is busy with people and vehicles coming and going. Wow, there are so many ships. This is Merkaba Academy. While the new students are still shouting and being loud, a girl with green hair suddenly raises her hand and calls out, "Hey, new students, gather here." Upon hearing that, Corin immediately walked over. The green-haired girl smiled and greeted him as he approached. "Are you a new student too?" Corin looked at her carefully, nodded, and introduced himself. "I'm Corin Locke." "Wow, you're tall. You must eat a lot. Want some potatoes?" As she spoke, the green-haired girl pulled some potatoes out of a basket and handed them to Corin. Corin mumbled softly, "Potatoes?" A moment later, a vehicle carrying a group of new students drove into the academy. It was the building where students of magic gathered to study. Over there is the physical training room. They have a lot of great weapons to lend out. Sitting in the new student group, Corin watched the cheerful, energetic girl with blue hair as she enthusiastically introduced everyone to each other. He thought to himself, that girl is Mariette Dumoulin, a second-year student and the top of the Merkaba Academy. Everyone loves her and she has a very bright future ahead. In life, there are many unexpected misfortunes, and in the future, Mariette Dumoulin will face a very big one. She will be the final boss in the first stage. Before long, the vehicle arrived at the designated area for new students. "All right, when you get off, each of you should grab a potato and a sweet potato," Mary said as she finished giving instructions. She waved from the vehicle and called out, "Good luck, everyone. See you later." The new students entered a spacious room. Corin noticed that on the ceiling, a formation was beginning to activate. He silently thought to himself, the expanded magic ritual has begun. Suddenly, the whole room was plunged into darkness. The students were confused, unsure of what was happening. A voice rang out, "Don't be afraid, everyone." How can the students of the academy be frightened by something like this? Corin casually poked his ears and muttered, "That's the voice of old Haman. He always says that like it's some kind of training camp." This world has a history of fighting against the demon race. The most effective weapons against them are the superhumans who can wield aura or mana. And the place where these people are trained is the Merkaba Warrior Academy. A beam of light shone down where the powerful sound of a voice echoed. The group of students finally saw a black man wearing glasses slowly walking toward them. He introduced himself. "I am Professor Fairmac Demon from the Knights Department, and I'll be overseeing this year's opening ceremony." Seeing Fairmac's relaxed demeanor, Corin smirked quietly and said to himself, "It's been a while since I last saw this guy. Most of you are probably here to become knights or mages. When you arrive, you should have already received your certificates, but don't think it's going to be easy. Let me see what you're capable of." As soon as Fairmac finished speaking, a small screen appeared in front of each new student. Corin looked down at his own screen. Corin Locke, aura rank 680, low. Mana rank 120, very low. Ability, none, very low. Overall rank 6, very low. Corin frowned and muttered, "This is boring." However, his physical stats were very high. At that moment, a row of numbers from 1 to 6 appeared in front of Fairmac. "Ah, you're looking at your rankings. Stand in front of the number that matches your rank," Fairmac said. Hearing Fairmac's urging, the new students all moved to the corresponding spots based on their rankings shown on the small screen. Corin stood at the front of row 6, a bit self-deprecating inside. "About 400 people, so I'm in the bottom 1%. Good luck, everyone." As soon as Fairmac finished speaking, all the new students turned into light and were teleported to their individual spaces. In the observation room, a group of professors also watched the scene unfold outside. A blonde female professor, seeing the students ranked first and second on the projection globe, spoke up. "This year's group has a lot of hidden talent. No need to focus on the top 2. Let's wait until we've finished evaluating the others first." Elisa Arden's granddaughter, the genius sword fighter. Avalon Yule, the cleric. Dron Warski's mercenary, the swordmaster. Cranel Ludin, the golem engineer, and the one and only top-ranked student, Heavenly Yaksha, Where? When the last name was mentioned, the blonde professor furrowed her brow in confusion. That child actually enrolled? What is the headmaster thinking? A male professor with a thick beard suddenly spoke up with a suggestion. Do we really need to evaluate the one in 6th place? 5th place doesn't look too great either. Let's just cut the 6th one. The blonde female professor angrily questioned. The principal said all students have the right to learn. Do you dare go against that? The male professor awkwardly replied, well, let's get started then. In Corin's space, a weapon cabinet dropped down in front of him, accompanied by a message. Asterisk monsters will invade in 30 minutes. Please handle as many as possible asterisk, a test that puts me in empty space and forces me to fight monsters based on their level. This is really tough. Corin walked up to open the weapon cabinet and happily began choosing. Let's see, most 5th or 6th year students wouldn't think twice and would just grab whatever they want. Most would choose a sword. I did the same in my past life. At that moment, 3 short-legged hunting dogs, ranked at level 5, appeared behind Corin. Ah, a sword looks really cool, but they say it takes 100 days to master a spear, 1,000 days to master a scimitar, and 10,000 days to master a sword, so the answer is a spear. As he spoke, Corin grabbed a spear, turned, and hurled it at one of the short-legged hunting dogs. The spear flew at incredible speed, giving the dog no chance to react, and pierced its head. Then, Corin threw 2 spears into the center and grinned, saying, sorry about that. The 2 short-legged hunting dogs growled and charged toward Corin. But after just a few steps, the 2 spears Corin had thrown from high above came down, piercing their bodies. Looking at the lifeless dogs, Corin added, but I have way too much experience killing your kind. Let's see, 20 seconds is a bit long. In my past life, I couldn't even kill these hunting dogs and got wiped out. But this time, it's different. I'll take out all of you until I level up. With that resolve, Corin slung the spear over his shoulder and confidently shouted, all right, bring on the next round. Corin waited for a while but heard nothing. He started to doubt, thinking, I hit the 5-minute mark. Why is nothing happening? Is the system broken? Meanwhile, in the observation room, the bearded professor watched the footage of the level 5 team, which Lark found frustrating. They can't even finish off those things, so what else could they possibly do? Back in my day, I took down level 5 monsters in 1 minute and 22 seconds. If level 5 was like that, I'm not expecting much from level 6. The bearded professor walked over to the level 6 observation area and was surprised to see Corin sitting there, yawning. Did he just get summoned? There must be a mistake. In the vast space, Corin sat, yawning as he waited for the next wave of monsters. Suddenly, 3 short-legged hunting dogs were summoned. He was confused and muttered, huh? Why these guys? In the observation room, the bearded professor summoned the monsters into Corin's space, then lost interest and continued watching the other spaces. Hey, these pathetic idiots. What the professor didn't realize was that behind him, Corin had easily dealt with the 3 monsters with just a few throws. Ah, is this the first one to succeed? Wow, it only took 7 minutes and 22 seconds. I thought a level 3 would only take 2 or 3 minutes. So what's level 5 and 6 doing? As he spoke, the bearded professor turned around and was surprised to see Corin still sitting there yawning. He shouted in confusion, what's wrong with that guy? Why is he yawning again? Is the system broken? The monsters are always summoned. The white bearded professor approached to check, asking, broken? That's impossible. For the past 20 years, Josephine's experimental magic has never failed. The professor with the beard pointed at Corin's image and said, but he should have been eliminated long ago. It's clear that the monsters were never supposed to be summoned. The white bearded professor asked, did you see the monsters that weren't summoned? The professor with the beard awkwardly responded, no, I don't have to see that. The white bearded professor pressed on, so, you didn't see it happen. The professor with the beard tried to argue, oh come on, I told you it was a mistake. I'll summon them again. Meanwhile, in the space, Corin was sitting bored waiting for higher level monsters to be summoned. But instead, 3 short-legged wolves appeared. What the hell? Why are these monsters still showing up? Aren't these just some training dogs? Corin yelled angrily. He stood up, grabbed 3 long spears and threw them at the monsters. The 3 monsters were immediately killed. The results appeared after 7.3 seconds. 7.3 seconds? What is this? Shouting loudly, the professor with the beard turned to call Fairmack. Look, Professor Fairmack. Fairmack looked over and asked, what's going on? What happened? The professor with the beard asked, what's the fastest speed you've recorded for level 3 and level 4 monsters? Fairmack responded, there's a kid named Jager who did it in 3 minutes and 30 seconds. Why are you asking? Nothing. The bearded professor casually brushed it off, then turned his attention back to Corin on the screen, thinking to himself, he's so good at dodging. He must be the son of a hunter. Let's see how he handles a level 4 monster. With that, a level 4 wild boar appeared in front of Korin. This time, the battle was even faster than before. Korin took just 3.7 seconds to defeat the creature. In the observation room, the bearded professor shouted, "This won't be so easy." He didn't believe it, so he immediately summoned a level 3 monster, a bear owl. Inside the arena, the bear owl roared as soon as it appeared, swinging one of its massive arms toward Korin. Korin dodged, appearing under the owl's wing, and thrust his spear. The bear owl reacted quickly, swinging its other arm at Korin. Korin had no choice but to abandon his attack, jumping aside as he quickly drew a rune in the air. Canas. Instantly, a burst of flame engulfed the bear owl. In the observation room, the bearded professor saw this and yelled, "Rune magic!" His shout caught the attention of the other professors. Even Fairmac glanced over and quietly said, "Rune." In the space, the bear-like creature of the Sea of Fire was wildly swinging its pure white arms. It doesn't seem to be very effective, but it'll block your view, and that's enough, Korin said as he jumped high, spear in hand, aiming straight at the creature's head and stabbing down, finishing it off. In the observation room, the male professor with a white beard looked at the scene with disbelief and muttered to himself, "That kid is definitely not an ordinary level 6 person. It's a shame that the monster test only goes up to level 3 monsters. Wow, it's been a long time since we've seen someone this interesting. I can't wait to see him fight against a demonic spirit." The bearded professor then reacted, quickly moving to operate something while saying, then let's start the level 5 demonic spirit test after this." In the space, Korin silently wondered. Something must have been summoned, but I can't see or hear it due to the restriction. The restriction? I can't perceive the soul. I can't feel or touch the soul. If that's the case, it means I can't touch the demonic spirit to see if my guess is correct. To test his own theory, Korin stood still, closed his eyes, and began counting. 1, 2, 16, 17, 45, 46, 58, 59, 60. That's it. It's definitely activated. I confirmed everything. Letting out a breath, Korin raised his hand and called out loudly, "I forfeit." His test results immediately appeared. Evil Spirit Exam. Rank 5, Ghost. Draw. Rank 4, Hex Rates. Failed. Rank 3, Banshee. Failed Beast Exam. Rank 5, Hellhound. 7.3 seconds. New record. Rank 4, Boar. 3.7 seconds. New record. Rank 3, Owlbear. 11 seconds. New record. In the observation room, a male professor with a goatee stared blankly at Korin, who seemed quite pleased with his results. He muttered to himself. He backed out. This kid, what even is he? By the time Korin stepped outside, a crowd of students who had just finished their exams had already gathered. They were casually chatting among themselves. "Hey, what rank did you get?" "Rank 4. I'm done for." "And you?" "Ha, rank 3. "Wow, so you actually took down an owlbear and a stomach demon?" Korin didn't pay attention to them. The person he was focused on was a student with blonde hair covered in tattoos. Jaeger Hinchpeter. That kid was the one who started the fight with the players at the beginning of the story. Park Sihu killed him because he provoked him. Jaeger was arrogant and a little careless, but at that age, that's pretty normal. Anyway, that crazy guy. As Korin was lost in thought, he was interrupted by a few whispers around him. "Look, they're level 5. Wow, so they couldn't even beat some monsters. Someone even lost to a hound and a ghost?" Korin glanced over at a student wearing glasses, head down, in a level 5 group. He thought to himself, Lark was way too careless. While bad-mouthing me and Sivu, he ended up with the same fate as Jaeger Asterisk. At that moment, a man stepped onto the stage holding a microphone and spoke. Good morning, everyone. I'm Director Iryu Kassar. To become stronger, you've all joined an academy where the powerful gather. Some of you are already strong, while others still have a long way to go. Although I can't promise that you'll achieve everything you want here, I hope you can each find your own path. We're going to help you take the right first steps. From the second step onward, well, that's up to you. That's all. I hope you have a great day. After Iryu's speech, the students and everyone else gradually dispersed. From today on, I'm a third-level knight, Jaeger Hinchpeter, Jaeger said. While speaking, Jaeger noticed Lark, who was sitting alone. He walked over and called out, "Hey, what level are you?" Lark looked up and answered, "I'm level 5. Jaeger chuckled and said, "Level 5. That's pathetic. You can't even kill a monster, or are you really just a hound dog?" Haha. At that moment, Korin walked over, threw an arm around Jaeger's shoulders, and laughed. "Hey." Jaeger raised an eyebrow and asked, "Who are you?" Korin didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked at Jaeger's tattoo on the back of his neck and complimented him. "Wow, your tattoo looks so cool. The tattoo artist must be really good, huh? Even up close, it still looks amazing. Is the one on the back your blood type? That way, you could get a blood transfusion quickly if you get injured. You really thought ahead? Jager pointed to the tattoo proudly and said, "Wow, you know a lot. To be honest, my mom did it for me. She's a tattoo artist. Her specialty is line work. But since I asked, she did it in the old school style." Corin laughed and said, "She's really something, huh? Do you have any other tattoos?" At that moment, Corin remembered. I already knew about that, the whole thing. When Jager went missing in the past, his mom came to the academy and said his tattoos weren't just for looks. She did it because she was worried about her son at the academy. That's what a parent's heart is like. Jager happily rolled up his sleeve, revealing a tattoo on his upper arm and said, "I got one here too." It's a flying carriage, the symbol of the Merkaba Academy. Corin responded, "Wow, that's cool. I'm Corin Locke. What about you?" "Jager Hinchpeter," Jager replied. Corin then turned to Lark, but Elisa, standing at a distance, thought differently. His smile was pretty cute. I wonder what kind of person he is. Most of Merkaba's facilities are free of charge. Coffee here is cheaper than outside, and the dorms are free. Among these, the most popular facility is the practice room. The reason is simple. When using this room, even the most impossible training becomes achievable. For example, fighting against a spirit body that Corin can't even see. Look, that freshman is practicing with a spirit body. Normally, you'd have to wait until the second semester to start training the spirit body. He probably heard rumors and decided to try it early. I've heard some second-year students still can't even catch a wind-type spirit body. The chatter from people outside watching Corin train caught Mariette's attention, and she stopped to observe. When she saw him get hit in the head by a spirit body, someone laughed and said, "Haha, look at that. The result of too much confidence." Corin stood with his hand on his waist, sighing, "Is it still too much for me?" At that moment, the white-birded professor walked over and said, "So, you're a freshman?" Corin jumped, turned around, and greeted him. "Hello, coach." The coach asked, "Why are you fighting the spirit body?" Corin replied, "It's to train my spear skills." The coach asked again, "Are you confident you can do it?" Corin answered, "I'll make it." As he spoke, Corin couldn't help but wonder, why is he suddenly approaching me like this? Did something happen with the test? The coach paused for a moment, then smiled brightly. He pulled out a stack of meal tickets, handed them to Corin, and said, "Good spirit, here, I'm giving you 10 meal tickets. When you succeed, come find me, and I'll reward you." Holding the stack of meal tickets, Corin was a bit surprised and exclaimed, "Yes, sir." By the time he processed it, the coach had already walked away. Corin let out a relieved sigh and smiled to himself. Why was I so worried? Rewarding me with food? Well, that's not bad, is it? Now let's start again. Corin continued to practice hard, repeatedly attacking the spirit body with his spear, but never managing to land a hit. In the end, he was struck by the spirit body and fell to the floor. Lying on the floor, panting, Corin suddenly felt a towel drop over his face. Mariette stepped up, handed him a cup of water, and asked, "Was it really that hard?" Corin honestly replied, "Yeah, I'm really tired." Mariette advised, "You should rest. You've been working hard. You just need to get used to it. One day you'll get there. Try again next time." "No, there won't be a next time. Though I might have 1 or 2 years left," Corin said. "Before, there was Park Sihu. We had the player window, plus the potions and skill books. But now, Park Sihu is gone. I killed him, so now I have to do everything on my own." Taking the cup of water, Corin silently thought to himself and said, "Thanks, I'll quit after this." Standing up once more, Corin's gaze was determined as he whispered to himself, "I have to become the strongest. First, I need to know my own limits. It might be too much, but I need to see how my current abilities compare to what I was before. I don't have a strong body, no magic or aura. The information about Park Sihu and the future is useless when facing monsters and these geniuses. But to fight against monsters and geniuses, I have to work harder than anyone. That's the only way. These past 3 years won't betray me." As he spoke to himself, Corin kept using spear techniques to attack the spirit body. After a while, with no result, he suddenly threw his spear upward toward the spirit body, but it dodged it with surprising agility. Mariette guessed, did he miss? Did he give up? Then she quickly contradicted herself. No, he hit it, and now he's catching it. Mariette could clearly see that, after Corin threw his spear, he had already predicted the spirit body's evasive move and managed to jump up and grab it. At the same time, he reached for the spear as it fell and used his strength to pierce through the spirit body. Wow, he's amazing. Just as Mariette was left speechless in amazement, Corin lost momentum in the air and fell hard to the ground. Worried, she rushed over and asked, "Are you okay, Junior?" Lying on the floor, Corin smiled bitterly to himself. Asterisk, I pushed myself too hard. At least with this body, asterisk. The next day, at a spot in the Merkaba Academy. "Hello, Junior. Today, I'll be showing you around the school's facilities. These are the pride of our academy. Oh, and over here is. While Mariette excitedly introduced the new students to the school, Corin was lost in thought. To fight properly, having a strong body was the most important thing. To improve his physical condition without relying on Park Siwoo's drugs, there was only one way: the teachings. Don't ignore the misfortunes of others. Corin glanced at Lark and walked over to throw an arm around his shoulders, smiling as he asked, "Hey there, want to grab a bite with me?" Lark was still a bit dazed, not sure how to react, when Corin leaned in closer and softly added, "And talk about spellbooks. A spellbook, to put it simply, is a powerful artifact that grants you magical abilities or traits just by reading it. The Merkaba Academy's library is as large as the whole campus and holds vast knowledge, passing it down through the generations. But it's mostly just nonsense. The real purpose of the place is to hide spellbooks. In the library, Corin pointed to a bookshelf and grinned. Don't you think it's like how trees should be hidden in the forest?" Lark, who was still behind him, chimed in. Yeah, you have to keep your promise." Corin responded, "Of course, as long as you meet the conditions, you'll get a spellbook." Lark was a dedicated student, the perfect example of someone who always followed the rules. He memorized every type of magic and kept notes in his journal. Of course, even though he knew all the spells, using them was another challenge. If your level and mana were too low, and knowing the theory wouldn't do you much good. But with a spellbook, that would be a different story. Quietly, Corin started rummaging through the shelves while the boss began searching too. B, C, D. Here it is. Hearing the noise behind him, Lark turned around and reminded him, "Stop messing around." Then Lark's eyes widened and he gasped, "A secret door? How did you find it?" Corin urged him, "Let's go." Lark quickly called out, "Wait for me, let's go together." In the narrow hallway, Lark followed Corin, glancing at the walls on either side. He muttered, "This is so creepy." Suddenly, Corin stopped. He turned around to look at Lark and stretched out his hand, saying, "It's time for you to keep your promise. You better do it right." Lark replied, "Yeah, okay. You want me to help fight the evil spirits, right? What exactly should I do?" Before Lark could finish speaking, Corin suddenly knocked him out with a punch. Then, grinning, he said, "Hey, let's get started, shall we?" Corin stood still, deep in thought. Even though I came here to rescue Lark and to complete a special mission, capturing an evil spirit here could earn me the hidden fragment I've been wanting. But there's a little problem. Sabantia Duke, a special evil spirit. This is an impossible mission. Why do I have to capture a special evil spirit and not just a regular one? The attack from the commander who led the Southern forces 800 years ago had caused most players to die as soon as the mission started. Of course, I wasn't among them. Thanks to my inability to see souls, the Duke's attacks didn't work on me. The issue is I can't see him either. Then, Corin suddenly lifted Lark and said with a laugh, "Sabantia Duke, sorry, but I don't see you here. How about you just take over this guy's body instead?" Corin's suggestion caused Sabantia Duke, who had been furiously attacking, to suddenly stop. He stood right behind the boy, silent as if lost in thought, wondering. There are many different factors in this world. This is one of those factors that can turn an ordinary person into something less human, like a vampire or a werewolf. One day, Sabantia Duke awakened, became a vampire, and killed his servant. Although he tried to control his vampire instincts, he failed. In the end, fearing he would kill his wife and daughter, the Duke had to move his entire family to a different place and seal the gates of the city. To avoid a massacre, he used magic to trap himself in a book, the very book in this library. At that moment, Sabantia decided to take over Lark's body. Lark's eyes turned bright red, and he screamed, charging straight toward Corin. "Are you coming straight for me? Is it because he's a vampire, or did something trigger him and drive him crazy?" Corin slightly leaned back to dodge the attack. Then he landed a punch to the head, knocking his opponent to the ground. The second reason I chose Lark is because he's possessed by a special evil spirit like Sabantia Duke. He can unleash the full potential of the power inside him. Lark, the model student in Asterisk Heroic Legend of Arden Asterisk, actually has the lowest physical strength stat. I really feel for Lark, but this is the best strategy to complete the mission. Alright, if I kill Lark while he's still possessed, I can get the highest grade items, like the Duke's cloak or the vampire armor, for example. These are all items Park Siwoo once used. They'll play a big role in what happens in the future, but I'm different from him. Corin quietly thought to himself, watching his opponent get back up, and then spoke. "Aren't you curious about your wife, Duchess Luina, and your daughter, Duchess Cecilia? How they're doing after you were sealed away?" Then Corin went on to tell the Duke many things. How his wife passed away after leaving the city, and how his daughter became an amazing explorer. He shared stories of her travel in the world. I don't agree with Park Siwoo's methods, but as Corin, someone who also has a family I love in this world, I want to make sure this poor soul dies in peace. Thinking this, Corin smiled and asked, "What do you think?" Are you satisfied with my answer? Tears were streaming down Lark's face. Sabasia said, I'm sorry for barging in on you. Thank you for telling me. Corin smiled and replied, It's fine. I wasn't really hit. Even if I was, Lark's punch wasn't that strong. Sabasia spoke up. I still have something I want to ask. Before Sabasia disappeared, he and Corin had talked for a long time. In the end, Sabasia faded away, leaving behind 3 items. 2 of them were epic level soul dust. The soul dust came from the special evil spirit of Sabansha Duke Grimoire, a book that once held the sealed soul of the Duke. The book contains psychic abilities and magic spells. If you read it, you could learn them. As for the last red book, Corin didn't hesitate and used it immediately. Asterisk Persistent Warrior's Regeneration Asterisk. You have gained a new ability. By using the magic book Asterisk Persistent Warrior's Regeneration Asterisk, you gain the ability to keep fighting like a warrior who never loses their will. As long as you stay focused, your body will continue to heal. Corin silently thought, Persistent Warrior Regeneration is the special ability that Jerk Park has, but I don't know how much it can heal. He's never actually been seriously hurt before. At that moment, Lark woke up. Corin looked at him and reminded him, You're awake? Don't rush. An evil spirit possessed your body just now. Lark asked, skeptical, Shouldn't my jaw hurt if I was possessed? Corin avoided eye contact and lied, I'm not sure, maybe. Then, Corin handed Lark the grimoire and said, Stop asking, just take this. Lark, curious, asked, Is this a magic book? Am I really allowed to have it? Watching Lark excitedly read the magic book, Corin thought to himself, The real reason I chose Lark is because I want to see what someone will do to earn their reward. System notification. Don't ignore the misfortune of others. Complete the mission for Duke Sabansha. Difficulty B, reward of 80 points, evenly distributed. Detailed information not available. Help Lark get out of here, Corin thought as he glanced at the notification. I got 80 points. In this game, every time you level up, you get 5 stat points. So this number must correspond to leveling up 16 times. But I didn't even see a level up notification, meaning the reward at level 1 is just 80 points. Could it be to make up for the fact that I can't directly increase my stats? But with this much experience, a system notification appeared, Rude task. Do not ignore the misfortune of good people. Stat points, 40. Reward distribution doubled x2. Corin Locke did not ignore the misfortune of Lark Bugman. Stat points, 40. Reward distribution doubled x2. Corin Locke did not ignore the misfortune of Sabansha Duke. The next day, in the physical training room, Marriott came in holding a basket of potatoes and called out, Hey, anyone want some potatoes? I do. While she was handing out the potatoes, Marriott suddenly noticed Corin warming up nearby. She left the others and walked over to him, asking, Are you going after the spirit body again today? Corin replied, Yes. Marriott smiled and said, I believe you can do it, Junior. I'll be cheering for you. The boys around them started talking. How could a first-year kid in 5th place possibly capture a spirit body? I was really focused, but I still failed yesterday. Don't give him false hope. What's with this new guy trying to get Marriott's attention? Hearing them behind her, Marriott smiled and turned around. Oh, really? Well, I'll bet 2 gold coins that Junior will succeed. Marriott, why are you taking care of him like that? I'll bet 70 silver coins he'll fail. As the brute behind her kept talking, Corin pouted and muttered, Why am I the one being used for a bet? I just want to practice. Back at the training grounds, Corin grabbed the spear and got into a fighting stance. Whatever, let's just focus. I already got my stats from helping Sabasia Resting Soul, so I know I can catch it. But honestly, I'm not sure how strong I am now. I'll start with the weakest, basic spirit bodies. The technique I used before to beat a spirit body was Asterisk Slithering Serpent Asterisk. It's tough compared to other Calamity Serpent techniques, so I'll go with the most basic move of all, Asterisk Serpent Detonation Asterisk. Even with that, it might still be hard to take it down with just one hit. With that in mind, Corin activated Asterisk Serpent Detonation Asterisk and lunged forward, thrusting the spear straight at the spirit body. A surprising turn of events, the spirit body was struck by one of Corin's basic moves and exploded. The people watching from outside were left speechless, exclaiming, Just one strike? Did Serpent Divination really reach that level? Even Corin found it hard to believe, thinking to himself, Wait, isn't that a bit too powerful? At that moment, Marriott walked up and said, Yesterday you shocked everyone with just 3 moves, right? This time you only needed 1. Corin softly replied, Oh yes. But in his mind, he was thinking, what's going on here? She must have seen everything yesterday. No, more importantly, a wizard can actually spot a calamity serpent with just their eyes. What kind of sharp vision is that? Marriott handed him a bag of money, pressing it into his hands. Here, this is for you. Corin, confused, asked, Huh? Mariette explained, "Thanks to you, I earned a little something too. Of course, I should give you a share." Corin questioned, "A share for me?" Mariette asked, "What's wrong? You don't want it?" Corin replied, "Of course I want it. Who would turn down money?" Mariette laughed, "You're really smart. Keep it up in the future." Quietly, Corin took the money from Mariette's hands, and the two of them exchanged a pleased smile. When night fell, Corin walked down the hallway alone, lost in thought. It had been the same in his past life. He worked hard fighting to improve his martial skills. Now it was the same again. He was almost at the 5th step out of 6 on his path to enlightenment. There was still a long way to go, but his martial arts were advancing faster than he expected, so he wasn't too worried. The real issue was the rune magic. Corin raised his hand and drew the Hagallard's rune. A system notification appeared. You lack mana. In his past life, he hadn't been able to fully master it either because rune magic required an enormous amount of mana. If he had been able to master it, he would definitely have been much stronger than he was back then. He needed to think more carefully. Suddenly, a voice echoed, "You." Corin froze, thinking to himself, this voice. No matter how much I focus on my martial arts or master rune magic, there's no way I can defeat this bastard at the academy. The only woman Paru couldn't even kill. One of the most powerful forces in the heroic legend of Arden, the infamous disruptor of balance, the heavenly Yaksha, Horan Asteris. He glanced at Warren, confused, wondering, why is she here? And why is she talking to me, He could know what was going on, but figured it was best to just ignore her and move on. After all, there was no way he could deal with this ticking time bomb. Corin was about to leave, but Warren disagreed. She spoke again. "You've been merged. I don't think you're the true owner of that body." Warren's words made Corin break into a cold sweat. He was terrified and looked at her again, thinking to himself, How does she know I've taken over this body? It seems like a body with 2 souls, one human and one spirit, can exist together. Warren's existence itself is unnatural. People say that those stuck between life and death can see the colors of the soul with their yin-yang eyes. Maybe it's even stranger that she hasn't noticed. After a moment of quiet thought, Corin just stared at Warren without answering her question. Seeing that he remained silent, Warren pressed on. "How does it feel? Crushing and swallowing that original soul's energy. What was that like?" "I don't know," Corin responded carelessly, but deep down he was thinking, "I was troubled by this in my past life too. Am I really Corin Locke? Is it really the memories of Corin Locke that have been absorbed and not my own memories? If that's true, then who was the person who went to that all-boys high school and then onto the military-focused graduate school?" "But it's all pointless," Warren said. "That body isn't like that. The true owner of that body is not a person." There was a brief flash of surprise on Warren's face when she heard Corin's response, but in an instant, her gaze returned to its usual cold, distant expression. "That body is the original. You're just a thief who stole it. You have no right to control it." Corin fell silent, his eyes narrowing slightly. "There's a guy in a neighborhood near my hometown who turns into a giant green monster whenever he gets angry. His name is Bruce. Do you know him?" "Bruce who?" What's even funnier is that these two completely opposite personalities actually hate each other. Really? That's interesting, right? They're good at different things. Corin tried to lighten the mood, pointing at his head and offering a silly smile. But the end of his story was so dull that Warden's gaze was mostly confused, with a touch of the kind of look a father might give his child. At this point, Corin sighed and said, "Anyway, what I'm trying to say is that whether it's the original soul or a newly formed one, they both have different personalities. And isn't that how they coexist? Whether we like it or not, we're born into a body. No one is guilty when they're born." Warren was silent for a long time. Then, with a hint of meaning in her voice, she said, "There are people in this world who are born guilty from the very beginning." Corin knew exactly how Warren felt when she said that, but right now, he couldn't do anything to help. So he chose to stay silent. "See you later," Corin said, then turned and walked away. The next day was the weekend, but as soon as the sun was up, Corin headed to the south side of the academy to check the mission board. The smaller missions listed there would help level up the main quest. That meant they were necessary for his progress. His goal wasn't to level up, so he didn't need to be picky. He just wanted to try out something. As he glanced at the girl standing next to him, Corin couldn't help but wonder why she was so focused on the board. Thinking back, he realized he didn't know much about Elisa. In his previous life, that jerk park had killed her, and now his memories felt different from what he'd seen in the game. The more he thought about it, the more curious he became, so Corin decided to ask Elisa directly. "So, you need the money, huh? That's why you're rushing to pick up missions like this?" Corin said. Even though students who reach level 2 get a decent allowance, and Elisa's family is among the top 10% wealthiest in the kingdom, the school decided not to provide her with any financial support. Not to mention, my family follows a self-sustaining lifestyle, so I have to earn my own living even if it's just the bare minimum. Even if I say all this, seeing the sorrowful expression on Elisa's face, Corin couldn't help but feel some sympathy for her. So he kindly suggested, if you need money right away, how about the patrol mission? It pays pretty well. Oh, really? Elisa asked, brightening up as she read the details of the patrol mission. Then she turned to Corin and said, they're accepting up to 3 people. Would you like to join me? Corin shook his head. I can't. I have other things to do. He already had his own plans. He was going to choose the most rewarding mission and quickly level up. The first task was to find a lost cat named Nobi. The experience points and rewards were minimal, but that wasn't important. His real goal was something else. If he rescued and returned Nobi, who had nearly been killed by a sea monster, Corin could prevent the pet owner from falling into depression over the loss of her beloved cat. By doing so, he would also earn a reward for fulfilling the request. Sure enough, after returning Nabi to its owner, Corin received a notification from the system. Mission complete. You did not turn a blind eye to Anna Marmon's misfortune. Difficulty level. E reward. 5 points, evenly distributed. Awesome. Just as I thought, the request really worked. Corin thought, even small missions like this can help me level up quickly. Corin laughed wildly, so excited that it scared little Anna, who quickly grabbed her pet cat and ran away. After successfully completing the first mission, Corin kept the momentum going, quickly finishing one task after another. For example, he rescued a weak young man who was being bullied by a group of thugs and helped a newlywed couple find a lost engagement ring. While he was basking in the joy of his growing success and rising scores, Corin suddenly realized he had forgotten something even more important than the points. He had actually made a note of it before leaving the house that morning. Time was running out, so Corin grabbed his pants and rushed to the fried chicken shop. There, a muscular man was fuming in frustration because he couldn't figure out the right recipe for the sauce to go with his chicken. Just then, Corin appeared like a hero. After suggesting that the man add malt syrup, Corin flashed a bright smile and quickly disappeared. What's wrong with that crazy guy? Who in their right mind would add malt syrup? The man grumbled. But despite the complaints, the man decided to give it a try. Moments later, even people 100 meters away could hear his loud shout, "This flavor, this is it." Corin stood outside, grinning to himself. This was the kind of task he was determined to finish. The world would be chaos without spiced chicken after all. At that moment, his system pinged with a notification. Complete the duty of not ignoring Yu Keijo's misfortune. Difficulty E reward. 5 points, evenly distributed. Corin was only doing this task because he enjoyed it, yet he didn't expect it to work out in such a way that got him so excited. He waved his arms around, laughing like he just hit the jackpot. What he didn't realize, though, was that his strange behavior was being watched from the rooftop by Horan, who muttered under her breath, "What a strange person." Suddenly, a voice came from behind Horan. "Are you here? I left you alone because you didn't leave the city, but at least you should have gotten permission to go out before you did." The female professor gently reminded Horan. Horan turned to look at her, but instead of responding, she just turned back to face Corin. Her mind wandered back to something he had said the night before: to be born without guilt is a happiness. Then her thoughts drifted to a memory from the past. The man looked at her with fury, gritting his teeth and saying, You shouldn't have been born." Warren stood silently, watching the sunset for a long while, as if she could feel the weight of loneliness pressing down on her small shoulders. A few days later, the school organized an assessment for all first-year students, focusing on their survival skills in the hunting grounds. The blonde professor began by briefly explaining the rules of the test. To reach the hut at the northern end of the forest, you'll be temporarily allowed to pass through. Make sure to wear the armband that matches your rank. You'll need to return it at the hut at the destination. You'll earn points based on the time it takes for you to reach the hut with your armband. The reward you get will correspond to the points you earn. While the professor spoke, Corin glanced around looking for Warren. Sure enough, Warren wasn't there. After all, Warren wasn't allowed to participate in the practical sessions. It was probably a fairness issue. As Corin was lost in thought, someone suddenly called his name. It was Elisa. "Did you complete the task well?" Elisa cheerfully replied, "Yes, thanks to you, I made a little money for living expenses. I'm really lucky. It turned out useful." She continued, her eyes sparkling. Then Corin took a golden candy from his pocket and handed it to Elisa. "Hey, do you want some candy? I was going to buy it for my little sister, but it's too sweet for me to eat." By coincidence, it was the honey bomb candy that Elisa loved. She happily accepted it without hesitation. At that moment, the professor spoke up. "All right, students, the hunting grounds test is starting." Finishing his words, the blonde professor conjured a massive magic circle, drawing awed gazes from the students. Even Corin couldn't help but be impressed. I've seen countless mages, but using spatial magic like this for such a large group of people, only Madame Josephine could pull that off. Just like always, huh? The Grand Mage. Just a few seconds later, the students were teleported each to a random spot within the hunting grounds. As soon as Corin set foot in his new location, he heard the sounds of a fight not too far away, and he couldn't help but be surprised. They're already fighting? It's just started. The hunting grounds were an important event, one even veterans had to participate in repeatedly. This was a battle royale system where participants started in random positions and had to take the opponent's gloves to accumulate points. Watching two other students battle fiercely, Corin muttered to himself as he ran, "Yeah, go ahead and fight like that. I'm not interested in dealing with you guys. The most dangerous one right now is Elisa, a level 2, the blue gloves. Oren's not here, so as long as I take care of Elisa, the rest of them will just be free points." Corin Locke smiled and said, "Elisa, you might not know this, but I placed a tracking spell on the candy you ate. This spell will ensure that we meet again." As Corin followed the instructions of the spell, he wore a shameless grin and kept calling out Elisa's name. He made his way back to the original gathering spot. At this moment, Professor Josephine spoke to the headmaster. "Headmaster, I'm heading into the forest too. Even though the professors are stationed all over, it's always better to be cautious." It was at this point that Professor Josephine noticed something strange. She turned around and looked around, then said, "Wait a minute, where's that kid?" "Headmaster, could it be?" The headmaster smiled and replied, "I didn't bring him here. He came on his own." "He came on his own?" "Yes. It seems like something in his heart has changed." Somewhere in the forest, Elisa, frustrated, was yelling at the students who had just attacked her, now lying scattered on the ground. "Why are you acting like this? Don't you feel ashamed? How many of you are attacking me all at once?" One of the students, still proud despite being beaten, sneered and said, "Being cowardly is our specialty." Just then, unexpectedly, a young man rushed in to ambush Elisa from behind. But unfortunately for him, his plan was foiled when a large rock suddenly came flying toward him. Discovering who had just helped her, Elisa couldn't contain her joy. "Corin, did you come to save me?" Unfortunately, her happiness lasted only a moment. A single sentence and Corin's next move sent a chill down her spine. "It's so beautiful, that green glove," Corin said as he lunged toward her, aiming his spear at Elisa. Of course, for someone like Elisa, who was at the second rank, this attack wasn't anything to worry about. She simply tilted her body slightly and easily dodged Corin's strike. However, the heart of this young girl was deeply wounded. "Corin, I trusted you. Because you gave me candy, I thought you were a good person." Hearing this, Corin showed no shame as he replied, "You'll become a good person too if you give me that bracelet." Elisa was a second-ranked knight, trained in pure martial arts. Her special defensive abilities probably hadn't reached the point where she could use them flawlessly yet. So, in terms of combat strength, she was currently at an intermediate second rank. That's why she couldn't compare to her genius older sister. Still, she was an outstanding talent, ranked in the top 1%. Because of this, even though she was facing a 5th-ranked knight like Corin, Elisa wasn't worried. She had just easily defeated a 7-member alliance, which included 3rd and 4th-ranked students. But that was a story from just 30 seconds ago. While struggling to defend against Corin's relentless attack, Elisa couldn't help but question life. What is this? He's way too strong. Corin closed in fast, combining swift maneuvers with long-range strikes. He toyed with her, counterattacked, and kept the pressure on without letting up. Still, Elisa was a second-tier knight, so she quickly regained her composure and started analyzing her opponent. She noticed something strange in Corin's breathing as he switched between thrusting and slashing. Asterisk if I can catch that gap. Asterisk, with that thought in mind, Elisa focused on Corin's arm. The moment he changed his move, she launched a counterattack. But unexpectedly, Corin seemed to anticipate her every move. In an instant, he used his spear to deflect her sword, then smiled confidently and said, "Relying only on talent without real combat experience won't get you very far." Then, Corin used his spear to neutralize Elisa's sword, following up with a series of 3 basic moves: Fatal Wound, 6 combination spear, and Chaotic Assault, all perfectly timed for maximum effect. At the same time, he executed a sharp counterattack, successfully defeating Elisa. Elisa was sent flying back, landing a few yards away, clutching her stomach. She sighed inwardly. Asterisk, I'm lucky I managed to channel some energy to block that strike. Otherwise, I might have been in real danger. Asterisk. Corin wasn't the strongest or the fastest, but the way he had perfected each technique was extraordinary. Asterisk, what is he? Is this a 5th-tier knight? I've been completely defeated. Asterisk. With no other choice, Elisa was forced to hand the blue ribbon to Corin. Corin took it happily and promised, "I'll use it properly." Just then, the loud noise and the frantic screams of many people rang out from a distance, drawing Corin's attention. Before he could go investigate, a large sword came flying toward him. Korin quickly raised his spear to block the massive saber, while quietly assessing it in his mind. It's too heavy. This sword is made of iron stone, which has a density 4 times that of steel, with additional magic enhancements. It's a magical sword designed to fight large monsters. It would be tough to withstand an attack from something like this. As he thought, Korin pushed harder. Fortunately, he managed to shift the sword's path. What? You blocked the heavy iron sword? Dron summoned the sword back with a flick of his wrist, then coldly ordered, "Drop that bracelet and disappear." 5th rank. Looking at the master of the sword who had just attacked him, Korin's mind screamed nonstop. Asterisk, it's over. This has to be Dron Worski. I really didn't want to run into him. Asterisk. Even after defeating countless opponents, there wasn't a single scratch on him, and he looked completely relaxed. This clearly meant he was different from Elisa. Now, with things being this way, Asterisk, Korin gritted his teeth, gripping the glove tightly. Asterisk. Then he grabbed his pants and ran, leaving Doran stunned. But only a few seconds later, Doran, with burning eyes full of affection, looked at Korin and said with a hint of something deeper, "Asterisk, the thing you have in your mouth must be green, right, Asterisk?" Without waiting for a reply, Doran signaled, and all of his weapons immediately turned to target Korin flying toward him. He himself quickly started chasing after Korin. Korin, feeling down, shouted out, "Why are you doing this? I thought you didn't do anything unless it made you money." Then he turned to Elisa, who was running right behind him, and asked, "Elisa, why are you following me?" While running, Elisa answered with a whine, "Because I don't want to die, and I don't know where the exit is." Korin kept running straight ahead, trying to comfort himself. Asterisk, all right, as long as I can get this glove out of here, there's no need to fight. Asterisk. Unfortunately, Cranel, leading a giant golem, was already waiting by the exit. As soon as she saw Korin with the glove, she smirked and said confidently, "Well, sorry, but if you want to pass, you'll have to leave that behind." The situation in front of Korin was giving him a headache. Cranel was up ahead and Dron was behind. While he had been trying to avoid fighting with others, he found himself facing 2 powerful opponents at the same time. There was really no way around it this time. If a fight was unavoidable, he had no choice but to face it. A moment later, a knock echoed through the house. "Oh, looks like the champion is here. May I ask who it is?" An older man opened the door and was greeted by Korin's smiling face. Korin was holding Elisa's green glove in his mouth. "I'm Korin Locke. Am I allowed to choose a product now?" Wow. Bringing back a blue badge, this is truly an impressive student. Hearing this compliment, Korin humbly replied, "It's nothing. I just got lucky." Outside the door, Elisa was still in shock from what she had just witnessed. Incredible. He weaved through those heavy iron sword strikes with his agility, getting past them before the sword could fully unleash its power. After disarming his opponent, he slammed the sword into the ground, making sure the opponent couldn't retreat it. The swords couldn't be blocked. He dodged them, and then found a way to make them hit the golems instead. With his quick thinking, he quickly hid behind Dron, using him as a shield to avoid the golem's attacks. As a result, while Dron was holding off the golem, he attacked the golem's core and disabled it. Immediately after, Cranel was taken down since there was no longer a golem to control. With his speed, sharp judgment, and even his determination, he showed he was someone who would have fought in hundreds, if not thousands of battles. Everything was decided in the blink of an eye, and perhaps that was the result of experience built up over time. He was so young. How could he be this skilled? Watching him, I felt like I could see my sister's figure in him. I remembered what Korin had once said, "Don't just rely on talent, don't be lazy when it comes to real combat." Elisa quietly made a vow to herself. "I need to push myself harder." Meanwhile, Dron kept staring at the sword in his hand, constantly wondering, before I could even use my full power, he quickly figured out how to deal with me. How did this kid spot my weakness? In the blink of an eye, he knew all my techniques and tricks as if they were right in the palm of his hand. In another corner, Cranel sat clutching his injured arm, his mind replaying the words Korin had said earlier. For small weapons, with high attack power and speed, a golem is nothing more than a target. If I were you, I'd ask a friend to escort and protect me, instead of relying on that golem. At the time, Cranel had responded, "Friends? I don't have any." Korin seemed taken aback, then replied, "Well, try to find yourself a friend." Remembering these words now, Cranel felt a sharp pain in his heart, tears flooding down his face. That bastard is mocking me. And so today unfolded as it did. 3 first-year students, each with their own strength, remembered Korin Locke in their own way. Now, among the remaining participants at the hunting ground, the most powerful one was considered to be the one blessed by the forest, Yule. But there were more than just ordinary players involved. Also present was the top mage of Merkaba Academy, Mariette Dunalev. She was helping train the others by taking on the role of a monster. For Yule, this was the first time she faced an opponent beyond her abilities. And so, the training at the hunting grounds came to an end. Mariette thought to herself. After Yule experienced her first shock, Mariette approached her and gently said, "Are you a new student?" "Hi, I'm Mariette. Your name is Yule, right? What about you? What's your name?" Mariette glanced over her shoulder and asked the nun standing not far away, who was Warren. "Oh, I bet you're looking for someone. I just gather my friends and stand up to you if I meet you." Warren ignored Mariette's words as if they were nothing more than a breeze, then gracefully walked past her. But she hadn't gotten far before a huge wall of ice appeared, blocking her path. Mariette smiled and said, "Sorry about that. You may not pay attention to me, but according to the rules, I'm still a monster, so I can't just let you go." Warren turned her head back to look at Mariette, her gaze becoming more dangerous. So annoying. Meanwhile, back with Corin. After a moment of calculating, the older man behind the counter couldn't help but exclaim, "A total of 117 points. It's been a long time since I've seen a score like that." Corin smiled eagerly and asked, "Can I choose my reward?" Immediately, a list of items appeared before Corin's eyes. The most valuable item was shark bear honey, but he had already come here with a plan in mind. Corin didn't hesitate and chose the ginseng seed. "Wow, you have a good eye for picking the ginseng seed. What about the other 17 points? Corin thought for a moment and then chose a nutritional supplement for the plan and covered his ears. After that, he quickly left the area. Not to mention, this is the first time I've seen them finish this part of the test so quickly. Corin looked up and saw Jaeger and Lark running toward him, or more precisely, running toward the finish line. Jaeger happily said, "Second place, 19 points. Lark, panting heavily, boasted, "I got 15 points. Corin smiled and praised, "You two worked well together." Jaeger wiped the sweat from his forehead and grinned, replying, "This was easy. Let's practice in the gym tonight. If we still have enough energy to make it to the gym, help me find the core of those golems." Krenel, who was nearby, jumped in surprise. "They're really valuable, right? We'll help you." Krenel was touched inside, but still played it cool, saying, "I'm fine. At times like this, you should be the one to say thank you." Corin quickly corrected Krenel's words and helped him search for the golem's core. In his previous life, Corin had worked closely with Krenel. There weren't many heavy-hitting shields like Golem in large-scale monster battles. Things seemed to be coming to an end. Second-tier mage Krenel Luton was recovering the Golem's core. Second-tier knight Elisa Arden was injured. Second-tier knight Dron Worski had run out of energy. Second-tier mage Yule was dead. Corin rushed over to check. After confirming that Yule, who was lying in a heap on the ground, was still breathing, he sighed in relief and helped her toward the goal. At that moment, Yule was barely conscious, murmuring, "Mariette, that girl." Suddenly, wild animals from the forest began fleeing in panic, and she whispered, "Mariette, run." With a natural talent for magical analysis and an abundance of mana, a mage like her had never known despair, disappointment, or failure. Her talent would eventually follow in the footsteps of the esteemed Professor Josephine. As people often said, Mariette Dunaleff was truly a genius. For Mariette, the hunting grounds were like a playground. She only needed to control the difficulty and guide the younger generation, acting as a mentor to help them grow. That was just how she did things. But facing Horan was a completely different story. Now, Mariette was standing in a corner breathing heavily after Horan's relentless attack. She told herself, "I need to analyze this." But at that moment, she realized Horan was charging toward her. With no time to think, Mariette quickly created ice arrows aiming straight at Horan. But this move was useless against her. As soon as the arrows hit, they shattered into pieces. Still, Horan kept coming for her. I can't block her attacks with just basic magic, Mariette thought. Even though she had promised the professor she wouldn't use magic beyond an intermediate level, the truth was she had already started using advanced magic. In other words, even though she didn't want to admit it, Mariette was now forced to give it her all to fight Warren. And that made sense because what stood before Mariette wasn't a knight, a wizard, or some kind of game. It was simply a natural disaster in human form. Mariette cast high-level magic to create an ice wall around her, but in the end, Warren broke through it. Then, unfortunately, Mariette took the full force of Warren's kick. The fight left Mariette seriously injured. As she saw Warren stepping closer, panic set in and she frantically raised her hand, ready to cast a spell, shouting loudly, "Don't come any closer." At that moment, Professor Josephine's voice echoed. "Warren, stop." Josephine stepped through the portal. After signaling for Warren to halt, she gently asked Mariette, "Are you all right?" Mariette responded, Yeah, I'm fine." But right after she said that, Mariette lost consciousness. In the end, the hunting practice grounds saw some unexpected outcomes. First of all, the student who ranked highest and scored the most points was Corin, a fifth-year student. Warren, the top first-year student, and Mariette, the top second-year student, had gotten into a conflict. When Corin heard that Mariette was injured, he immediately rushed to the infirmary to check on her. Seeing Mariette lying peacefully on the bed, he let out a sigh of relief. That was close. I thought she might have already turned into a boss-level threat. She seems fine now. Everything's probably still going according to the original plan. I'll leave it for now. There's still 3 weeks before she fully awakens. I need to get ready for a few things. Just leaving the hospital room, Corin walked out toward the edge of the forest, heading to the hunting grounds to meet someone. He looked around to make sure no one was nearby, then began to cry. After that, he went to the lake, pretended to slip, and dropped a precious ginseng seed. He closed his mouth and whispered, "What should I do now? This seed is so valuable, my mother left it to me." As Corin cried uncontrollably, a gentle voice called out, "Why are you crying?" He's here, Corin thought, feeling a sudden sense of relief. In the heroic legend of Arden, there's an Easter egg that can only be used once. For those who don't know, an Easter egg refers to a hidden detail or feature placed by the creator in a game, movie, or story designed to surprise and entertain players or viewers. The golden axe that the hermit offers the woodcutter is a reference to when the woodcutter accidentally drops his iron axe into the lake. The hermit asks whether it was the golden or silver axe. This story mirrors the legend where the golden and silver axes appear, but only for unique or lower-level weapons. If any other items are thrown in, nothing happens and everything just stops there. Corin had tried throwing 500 different items into the hermit's lake, but nothing ever happened. However, some experienced players took up the challenge, tossing random items into the lake, including rare artifacts. Once again, these attempts led to no results, but they still sparked curiosity. Back in the present, after listening to Corin recount the events, the hermit opened his hand, revealing a golden seed, and asked, "Is this golden seed yours?" "No, it's not," Corin answered tearfully. "Then is it this silver seed?" "No, it's not," Corin continued, sticking to the script. The hermit smiled kindly, opened his hand to show a living ginseng seed, and said, "This must be your living seed." "Yes, that's right. This is definitely my living seed," Corin replied with all of his heart, tears streaming down his face. With a bonus of a joyful smile, Corin added, "Even after seeing the gold and silver seeds, I didn't get greedy and remained completely honest. I truly value honesty, and for that, I will give you these seeds." The hermit left all 3 types of seeds, ginseng seed, silver ginseng seed, and golden ginseng seed, with Corin before diving into the water. Because of this, he never saw the wicked smile on Corin's face. The regular ginseng seed usually helps increase mana, but the gold and silver seeds have very special effects. These 2 items can multiply. This is a hidden feature that can only be obtained through this method in Asterisk, Heroic Legend of Ardan Asterisk. The golden ginseng seed, if planted, causes the ginseng plant to glow the golden light. The silver ginseng seed, if planted, causes the ginseng plant to glow the silver light. In his past life, Park Sihu ate the golden seed and Corin ate the silver one. But now, they would both belong to Corin. That night, Corin returned to the dorm to rest after a long, exhausting day. But the events to come were impossible to ignore and kept him deep in thought. According to the story, what made Mariette the first boss and awakened her into a vampire, especially with the mission that would take place over the next 3 weeks, was her encounter with the city's killer vampire, John Doe. I'm not sure how the demon's minion inside Mariette was awakened, but we still have time. That's also why I showed my strength against the stronger second-tier players. No one wants to fight alongside a weak 5th-tier knight, even if I asked for their help. What first attracted them to the main player was his natural talent and power. In just 1 week, he would fully recover. At that point, he planned to propose forming the first boss guild for Asterisk, Heroic Legend of Ardan Asterisk. The special vampire, Mariette Dunalef, still has 3 weeks before she awakens. If I'm well prepared, confident, and have enough members, I can easily save this girl from her unfortunate fate. Until then, he would train Alyssa, help the mercenary drawn master his sword, recruit the druid from Avalon Forest, and get closer to Cranel, the golem sorcerer. If everything went smoothly, this would be as easy as eating candy, so long as nothing unexpected happened. Thinking about this, Corin happily went to her room to rest, unaware of the unexpected events that were about to unfold. In the middle of the night, Isabel, the friend who was keeping watch over Mariette, suddenly woke up. She noticed Mariette sitting quietly on the hospital bed and quickly asked, "Mariette, are you okay? How's your throat?" Seeing Mariette remain silent, Isabel assumed she was still upset about being defeated by Warren. Isabel tried to comfort her, saying that first year, she should know her limits. You're still restricted by basic magic after all. Suddenly, Mariette's eyes turned red. She stared at Isabel's neck before grabbing her by the shoulders and urgently said, "I'm so thirsty." Because of the fight and injuring a senior, Warren was punished with a 4-day suspension. How boring. Warren closed her book, and for some reason, She recalled what Josephine had said the day before. I should have never sent this to you. If you want to learn, I'll tutor you one-on-one. But think about your actions. Should I just jump out of the window instead? While Horan was deep in thought, Corin suddenly appeared at the window where Horan was sitting, hanging upside down in a way that was anything but ordinary, causing Horan to jump in surprise. With a grin, Corin said, "Oh, I knew you'd be here, Horan, right? I think I saw you around earlier. I'm Corin Lott. Can you open the window?" As she spoke, Corin lifted a snack box to show Warren. Though Warren acted uninterested, she still followed Corin's request and opened the window. "Here you go. I wasn't sure what you liked, so I just grabbed this random pastry. And well, it'd be weird to come empty-handed." Warren pointed at Corin's face, warning her, "You're breaking school rules by coming in here." Corin laughed and replied, "I'm not coming in. I'm hanging on a tree, see? And what if I wanted to come in anyway? I don't think Miss Josephine is around right now either." Corin took a moment to scan Warren, thinking to herself, "Asterisk, I came here just in case she was hurt, but she doesn't have a single scar. Looks like she's been kept inside and isolated for more than 4 days. Probably because of what happened at the hunting grounds. She's a demi-human, so it makes sense that Miss Josephine is worried. But keeping her locked up like this for so long." Asterisk. While Corin was deep in thought, Warren suddenly mentioned something important. "Where did Miss Josephine go? It's been more than 4 days since we've seen her around here." "What?" Corin quickly asked. "She hasn't come back even once since then?" "Nope." Warren's answer shocked Corin so much that he forgot he was hanging upside down from the tree. He relaxed his legs and immediately fell to the ground. The pain was intense, but his powers kicked in right away, activating his persistent warrior's regeneration to heal his body. Forcing himself to ignore the pain, Corin quickly said goodbye to Warren and headed straight to the infirmary. Miss Josephine left and abandoned Warren, the most dangerous person at the Merkaba Academy. Then there's Professor Dana, the representative fighter for the magic department, and Professor Firmicdumin from the knights department. Both of them used to be guardians, but now they're nowhere to be found. This clearly means something unusual is going on. Corin's request to see Mariette was denied. Mariette's guard, Isabel, had disappeared, and there were even guards stationed outside the infirmary. From the very beginning, Corin had felt that something was off. The more he thought about it, the more his suspicions seemed to be proving true. Denied entry to visit Mariette, Corin quickly resorted to a sneaky trick, claiming that Josephine had sent him with food for the guards. To his surprise, the guard believed him without question and ate the food Corin had laced with laxatives. Less than a minute later, the guard's stomach began to react. In this urgent situation, the guard had no choice but to ask Corin to take over for him for a moment while he rushed off to deal with his sudden need. Once the guard was gone, Corin wasted no time. He moved swiftly into the room. Before pulling back the curtain by the bed, he took a deep breath to steady himself, trying to reassure himself. No way. That can't be happening, right? There's still a whole month left, and it's still too early. I really hope my suspicions are wrong. "Mariette?" Corin called as he pulled the curtain aside. "Isabel. Mariette was supposed to be here, so why is it Isabel now? Wasn't she missing?" His gaze stopped on the bite mark on Isabel's neck, and it hit him with sudden clarity. No doubt about it now. This is what the professors were trying to cover up. Mariette Dunalev had awakened as a vampire and become a threat, the first true final boss. What's more, this had happened 3 weeks earlier than the original timeline. Right after returning from the infirmary, Corin immediately began to search for a solution. There's a 4-phase attack strategy to defeat the first final boss. Phase 1. Quickly and efficiently deal with the monster's waves of attacks. Phase 2. Trap her in magic circles. Once we gain the upper hand by dealing enough damage, we can move on to the next phase. Phase 3. We'll directly confront the powerful enemy wreaking havoc in the blood-ravaged area. After we defeat it, it will transform into its final form, and the last phase will begin. The focus of this attack strategy is on the final form, so sometimes the player might not even be necessary. If possible, first-year Academy students working together should be able to make it to Phase 3 without too much trouble. But thinking about this, Corin couldn't help but feel a headache. Elisa Arden got hurt because of me. Dron Worski's weapon was destroyed, also because of me. Cranel Luden's golem core was damaged and hasn't recovered yet. That's also my fault. Didn't I just completely ruin all the top first-year students? This is bad, it's all messed up. Corin, feeling overwhelmed, grabbed his hair in frustration. In the original version, after the vampire assassin encounter in the Misty City, Mariette attacked her roommate and went into a fit of rage. After that, in my past life, after that incident, everyone waited for Isabel, who was downstairs in the dorm, to quickly resolve everything. Meanwhile, Park Seo purposely let Mariette escape, but because of me, everything became a complete mess. Elisa had 8 broken bones, and Cranel's golem was damaged, making him completely useless. I also thought about Warren, but I couldn't predict how the battle would change if he got involved. So, the very next day, Korin began recruiting. First, he went after Drawn. In a corner of the gym, Korin approached Drawn and made his offer. Here's your work registration certificate, mercenary. This mission is particularly tough. I need to find and capture someone. Drawn frowned and replied, are you crazy? The rule for mercenaries is to only fight battles we're sure to win. Plus, you broke my sword. I only have 2 left. At first, Ron firmly refused. But as soon as Korin mentioned a reward of 20 gold coins and 100% pure soul dust, he threw all his principles out the window and immediately agreed to join Korin's team. The next targets were Yule, Javier, and Lark. Based on their personalities and knowing exactly what each of them desired, Korin had no trouble convincing them to join his team. Specifically, he used a magic book to lure Yule, promised Javier and Lark the honor and fame that would come from successfully taking down a particularly powerful demon clan to win them over. With 1 damage dealer, 1 healer, and a few others, they had enough strength to make it through the first stage. That was the minimum requirement met. That night, the group gathered and set off. As Korin led the way, he remembered something Sihu had once said. Back then, she cried and ran into the forest. It took so much effort to find her. Who would have thought that someone so strong would dig a tunnel in the woods and stay hidden there for a whole month? He said she was hiding in the forest, and there was only one forest near the Merkaba Academy. That's why Korin was taking everyone to the hunting grounds. Is she really here? Mariette, I mean. Master, I get the goal of the mission, but how are we supposed to find her? Drawn asked, also puzzled. Korin, leading the way, replied, find her, if we try, it might take years. But if you want to know, just ask her. She'll give us the answer. Don't worry. Korin's complete lack of worry made Yule suspicious, right? You already know what's going on, don't you? Despite saying that, Yule still planted his staff into the ground and began chanting, spirits, guide us to her. Lark, watching the spell with interest, couldn't help but murmur, wow. Jager, equally excited, Arden, look, a whole swarm of spirits is gathering around. Judging by their reactions, it seems like a ton of spirits are answering Yule's call, but I don't see anything. Korin quietly thought to himself before turning to Yule and asking, so, have they found Mariette yet? Yule hesitated before answering, yeah, they have. Immediately, everyone gave Korin a strange look, which made him uneasy. What's going on? Why is everyone staring? Where is she? Someone, panic in their voice, shouted, she's right behind you. Before anyone could say more, Korin instinctively sensed danger. He quickly raised his spear to block a surprise attack from a monster. Then he spun around and slashed through the creature, killing it instantly. But then not just one, but a whole group of monsters charged at them. Lark and Jager both shouted in disbelief, did Mariette turn into a monster? Korin quickly responded, no way that's happening. Upon getting the answer, Jager excitedly laughed out loud. Charging into the monster horde, he shouted, you dare face Jager head on? This is exactly the moment I needed to warm up. Korin yelled out, warning Jager, don't rush forward. They'll surround you. Step back 3 paces, don't be reckless. Keep fighting and their numbers will drop gradually. Then he turned to direct the others. Lark, cover the rear. You'll stay with Lark. Drawn, you know what to do. Don't push too far. With that, Korin rushed forward to support Jager. The others immediately followed Korin's instructions. As Drawn fought off the monsters, he glanced at Korin, feeling a deep sense of admiration. Even though the attack came out of nowhere, he didn't seem surprised at all. What's more, he mapped out a solid plan and kept supporting us. He's not just strong, but he's got the experience of a team leader, a strategist who knows how to command a group. He acts like a commander. Who would have thought he's only a level 5 knight? There's definitely something wrong with the Academy's ranking system. The growing number of monsters started to make Jager anxious. He quickly turned to Yule and asked, hey, I thought Mariette was supposed to be here. What's going on? I don't see her anywhere, just monsters. Yevon, looking confused, responded, well, that's what the spirits said. That's all I know. At that moment, Lark offered a theory. Could Mariette be controlling them? Monsters don't usually hunt in packs like this. They seem more aggressive than usual. Korin quickly denied it and explained, no, Mariette's not the one pulling your strings. It wouldn't be that easy for her. And even if she could control them, this chaotic attack is nothing like her style. Drawn then raised a question. So why? Why are these monsters attacking us? Korin replied, neither of those things are true. Every species of monster has its own hunting behavior. Sometimes, though, they end up in desperate situations where they forget their natural instincts. For example, they might encounter something they can't handle, something that makes them flee instead of fight. Just as Korin finished speaking, a figure stepped out of the trees. When the group saw her, they all called out in unison, Mariette. Korin immediately gave the order, get ready for battle, Yule. Lark, Fall back. Lark jumped back while complaining, I can't even catch my breath. Yule followed suit and asked Corin, is this good enough? Corin nodded approvingly and then directed Dron and Jaeger. Dron, Jaeger, take a step back and support me. Dron, while preparing his weapon, smiled and replied, looks like you already have a plan, so I trust you, my master. Jaeger, with an innocent look, asked, are you talking about a step like the one you take or the one I take? Corin confidently responded, I'll take the lead. Right after that, Corin's system kept sending notifications. Third rule, I will save the world of Mariette Dunalef, increasing all stats by 50%. Mariette's fate and her impact on this world. These backup stats clearly depended on the scale of future events, not on what happened in Chapter 1. I will save the world. Let's take the first step to rescue the world and stop Mariette. Looking at the final notification, Corin took a deep breath, refocused, and raised his weapon, shouting, all right, let's charge. I'm going to save the world. Let's take the first step to save the world and stop Mariette. This conflicted with the first room rule. Don't ignore the misfortune of others. Save Mariette Dunalef, hero Corin Locke. Good luck. Mariette kept groaning, her entire body radiating a dangerous dark aura. Her eyes were bloodshot with killing intent, yet she was crying tears, 2 streams flowing down her face. The contrast in that image moved Yule deeply. Asterisk, she's crying. Asterisk. Hearing this, Dron coldly remarked, it won't change anything. Just focus on wiping out the demon race. With that, Dron sent his heavy iron sword flying toward Mariette, but it was immediately blocked by a red orb. I can't believe my heavy iron sword was stopped. Lark spoke up to explain that's a blood orb, created from the blood of a vampire. I didn't expect a newly awakened vampire to have one of those with her. Realizing the growing fear among the group, Corin reassured them, don't worry, it's just been born. It hasn't been fed blood or magic yet. Without a supply of blood or magic from its master, he can't do anything except block attacks. For a mage, their biggest weakness is defense, and now, with this orb protecting her, that's a serious problem. Dron reminded Corin, it's fine, don't worry. Corin scratched his head and replied, just get lost. Mariette shouted loudly and then launched a wide area magical attack at everyone. Yule. Yule immediately responded and began to act, I got it. I don't know how things are elsewhere, but this is my forest, my domain. As she spoke, she placed her hands on the ground and began to cast a magic circle. Almost instantly, massive tree trunks burst from the earth, forming a giant wall in front of her and her teammates. This skill not only helped block the incoming attack, but it also boosted Yule's attack speed and protected her soul from harmful effects. The moment Mariette's magical bolts hit the wall Yule had created, she immediately felt the overwhelming power behind them. Seeing the sweat dotting Yule's face, Jaeger grew concerned and asked, what happens if that wall breaks? Lark, already terrified, became even more panicked after hearing Jaeger's words. She immediately scolded him. What are you talking about, Jaeger? What did you mean to say something like that? Yule silently thought to herself, asterisk, that one attack already cost me half my mana just to maintain this defense. The effect of the vampire's deadly hunting grounds is affecting me, but I have to hold on so the others have a chance to strike. Corin promised he'd defeat this vampire after all asterisks. Then Yule gave herself a quiet mental pep talk. Corin spoke up, reassuring Yule, Yule, you've reached your limit, haven't you? Just hang on a little longer. I'll handle it in 5 moves. Can you do it? Yeah, of course I can, Yule replied. The battle with the vampire Mariette was divided into 4 stages. In the first stage, she summoned monsters to attack the player team. In the second stage, after you defeated the monsters, Mariette herself enters the fight. You have to face her from stage 2 to stage 4 in order to trigger her most powerful spells. In other words, before the final stage, she hasn't used all of her power. This time was no different. It happened just like it had in Corin's past life. Lark, you should leave now with Yule. You only have enough mana for about 2 more basic spells. So, take care of yourself. Lark was surprised when he heard Corin's warning. Did you actually count that? Corin answered Lark, then turned back to watch the wall in front of them. Yeah, once you run out of mana, just get as far away as possible. So far, the attacks have been wide, but not very strong. The real danger was the alchemy spell that would come next. Sure enough, just moments later, the wall was covered in large and small cracks, and soon shattered into pieces due to Mariette's alchemical freezing spell. As soon as the wall collapsed, Yule began chanting the incantation. Mother Earth nourished by trees and barley. O gods and insects, let the ashes fill the world. While Yule chanted, Corin quietly muttered an ancient phrase. When he saw Yule's body start to glow, a powerful whirlwind appeared. Corin knew that the gods were answering his call. Even though Yule was the one who wrote the ancient script, only a pure rune could activate it. Though it resembled the ancient tongue, it was a system language from a different civilization. Secret language is only unlocked after completing Yule's story. He had always tried to become a forest mage, a wizard of the ancient woods, a child of nature. The 1,000-year-old secret language belonged only to those of the clan who were close to the spirits. The whirlwind swept up ancient trees from the forest, gathering them into one spot. From there, a massive wickerman emerged, leaving Jaeger and Drawn staring in awe. Even Yule was stunned, staring at Wickerman, then shouted, "That old saying can summon something like this." Seeing her reaction, Corin couldn't help but laugh to himself, thinking, yeah, it's a bit of a cheat to help him summon this thing. But in a situation like this, there's no other choice. With time running out, Corin quickly gave instructions. Jaeger, there's still one owlbear left alive. Throw it to Wickerman now. The owlbear is still alive. Jaeger, unsure, looked around, then gasped, "Wow, you really pulled it off." "There's one left, Corin." Corin didn't answer, but just smiled and let it go. "You're not going to tell him that owlbear was your idea while they were busy fighting, are you?" Corin urged, "Hurry, throw it at Wickerman's chest." Jaeger nodded and, with precision, tossed the owlbear directly onto Wickerman's chest. As it burned inside Wickerman's ribcage, it seemed to fuel the magic required to bring the figure to life. The moment the owlbear was incinerated, the energy core on Wickerman's chest shifted color and even its eyes changed from red to green. Corin shouted, "Move forward." Wickerman immediately began moving its massive body, heading straight toward Mariette. As soon as Wickerman moved, Yule felt a sharp pain that made her uncomfortable. Instinctively, she placed her hand over her left chest and said, "It seems like it's too much for him. It's really hard for him to handle summoning magic like this for just a few minutes." Hearing this, Corin quickly encouraged Yule, saying, "Don't stop, Yule. If you stop, everyone will die." Yule was in so much pain that her whole body was soaked with sweat, but she still managed to respond, "I know, I'll try." When Mariette saw the figure getting closer, she unleashed her power and used wide area magic to attack Wickerman. Jaeger, concerned after seeing Wickerman's body full of holes from Mariette's attack, asked, "Corin, is this okay?" Corin reassured him as usual, saying, "Don't worry." He said this because Wickerman wasn't a living creature, was just a puppet. Having a few holes in it wouldn't kill it. And in theory, in a battle between fire and ice, fire should never lose. That's what he thought until he saw the flames of Wickerman extinguished by Mariette's magic. Watching Wickerman collapse and fall to the ground, Corin felt a sense of unease for the first time. It was like everything he knew was being turned upside down. This was the special difficulty level called Mariette Dunalev. Yule couldn't hold on anymore and collapsed, her body stumbling. "Yule, fall back now," Corin ordered. "What?" But she started to protest. Corin cut her off immediately. "I'm out of mana, so there's nothing more I can do. You go ahead, I'll pull back." Yule didn't argue further and simply followed Corin's instructions. Jaeger, looking confused, asked, "Do you think we can actually pull this off, Corin?" Mariette Dunalev had already used all her wide area attacks, so her magical energy was running low. "Do you guys know what that means?" Corin asked. "What does it mean?" Drong replied. "It means it's our turn," Corin said, his voice steady. With that, Corin rushed toward Mariette. Drawn and Javier didn't hesitate either, charging in alongside him. While dodging Mariette's magic, Drawn sent his heavy iron sword flying straight at the blood ore. But the moment it made contact, the sword was blocked. Drawn grumbled in frustration. "This blood ore's tougher than I thought." Just then, Jaeger leaped high into the air, built up speed, and slammed into the blood ore. It was his special attack, destruction stacking. The damage dealt to the enemy increased exponentially with each hit. "That guy's actually useful. Good thing I brought him along, haha, I broke it." Jaeger laughed, feeling proud. Before he could enjoy his success, Corin yelled at him, "Idea, watch out." When the blood cell ruptured, it marked the beginning of Phase 3 and the blood realm was activated. Mariette let out a scream before unleashing her power, creating a shockwave so intense that it injured Drawn and Jaeger, sending them flying far away. Only Corin remained standing after Mariette's outburst. He pushed himself off the ground, injured, and thought to himself, "We're trapped in this world now." The moment the blood cell broke, it triggered a trap, and now we're stuck in it. The pressure is real. Before, it was only passive defense, but now the blood cell has absorbed her blood and magic and created this. I don't think it's just me who has to fight it at this stage. In our previous lives, it took at least 3 people to fight the 3rd phase, but now... Corin let out a deep sigh, then hoisted his spear over his shoulder. With a confident look on his face, he said, "Well, it's not much of a problem. The result is still the same. I'm the one who will win." On Mariette's side, thoughts about the hunger of a vampire began to surface in her mind. If you were born a normal human, you could easily tell the difference between an animal and a human. If you really are human, it's natural to be so terrified that you close your eyes tightly. When I saw the animals desperately fighting for survival, a strange sensation suddenly swept over me. A cold wave ran down my spine, completely different from the burning heat in my throat. My throat was drawn to someone's neck, someone I didn't even know the name of. I bit into it. My fangs, which had always been there, ripped through the flesh, reaching the person's bloodstream. The animal was trembling. I couldn't tell if it was fear before being preyed upon or if it was desperate resistance. But honestly, it didn't matter anymore. The fear that used to make me shut my eyes had disappeared. The painful moans echoed in my ears like a piano melody. Warm blood flowed across my tongue, wetting my throat. It spread through my body, warming my cold skin. Just when I thought my veins had stopped pulsing, it felt as though they were being stretched wide open again. The moaning of Isabel and the creaking of the bed stopped. All that was left was the sound of my heartbeat, pounding so hard it felt like it might explode, spreading throughout my body. The sweet iron scent of blood both suffocated and disgusted me. My body, so full of life, felt like it was about to collapse completely. Because now I realized that it wasn't some animal I had been dealing with. I had committed a crime. I had almost killed my friend as if I were just killing an animal. Mariette began to panic, and not only that, she became even more ruthless. Even when she realized she had treated others like animals, she clutched her growling stomach and ran off. It wasn't until her son found her Corin. Right now, Corin was facing off against a monstrous wolf-headed creature. It shot spiked bullets from its mouth, charging straight toward him. Confidently, Corin used his stab 6 steps, 4th step technique to fight back against these damn beasts. Damn it, how dare one of you bite a human? He rushed forward with a spin. Using his spin returning heaven, the monster immediately summoned 2 of its minions. This damn dog has really pissed me off. Corin easily dodged the attack from the 2 smaller dogs. He struck with his stab 6 steps, 5th step, throwing a pagoda tree mountain, sending the 2 dogs to their deaths one by one. This is like serving a meal to Corin, a little wine and good company, and it's perfect. Everything felt pretty simple compared to the growls of the creature. Furious, it teleported, moving so quickly that Corin couldn't even keep up with it. Well then, let me teach you a few moves, little pup. Winning didn't require a 100-step plan. What mattered more was finding the weak spot with just one move. This technique is old news, pup. You can't use the same trick twice. Rising serpent skies, poisonous dragon exit. The power surge was so intense that it shattered the protective space sphere surrounding them. The monstrous wolf lay there, gasping for breath, barely holding on. Even though it was on the verge of death, it kept fighting. It chose to protect the one who created it, even until its last breath. Corin couldn't understand why this was happening. Just wait, he thought. He'll definitely save his mother, Mariette. The final stage. As soon as this phase began, Mariette Dunalev pushed one of her team members into a life-threatening situation. That's why it was impossible to stop her bloodthirsty battle frenzy alone. Usually to save a team member who's being targeted by a vampire, the entire team needs to stay close together and confuse her, making it harder for her to identify the weakest target. But right now, no one could help Corin. The system reported that Mariette Dunalev's vampire effects on both her stamina and mana were regenerating. Corin now understood what it felt like to have his life force drained. He could handle it. Corin had the skills to deal with this. He could endure things like this. Persistent warriors regenerate, like warriors who never lose their fighting spirit and always maintain their will. His body would keep healing. Corin tried to recall the moment when that kind-hearted child had been talking to everyone, sharing potatoes with her small hands. He gently reminded her, take it slow, don't choke. Let Mariette feel something. Since he had grown up, the moment Duke Sabancio was awakened as a vampire, he had drained the blood of his servants until they died. Even the greatest commander left in history couldn't control this thirst for blood. It took Park Sihu a month to capture Mariette and force her to drink the monster's blood. The taste of it was like seawater, only making her thirstier. But Mariette had never killed anyone. She resisted the hunger and thirst with her extraordinary willpower. This was an unnecessary arrangement for the final boss, who had only one weakness. That's why Corin believed there had to be a better outcome. Mariette woke up, tears and snot streaming down her face, and apologized to Corin. It doesn't matter if I have to die 1,000 times, whether I'm the top witch or if the truth is that I'm a vampire. None of that matters. Corin always looked at her personality the same way he did with Park Sihu, like the lessons from the mentor he met in this world, which had changed him into a different person. That mentor once said, I am the adult son. As long as I'm still an adult, I'll always bear the responsibility to protect you. The one he had always looked down on, thinking of them as nothing more than an NPC in the game, had protected him and told him that he was just a child. As a successor, Corin had witnessed the final moments of that person, just like the disciple who had listened to those teachings. It was okay to be a little more sure that he had grown up, Look at that Park Sihu. He would definitely choose a different path than that person. The system notification displayed Marriott difficulty level S reward. Aura rank increase from low to loaded, rank increase from lowest to low, pain tolerance ability of 100 points, evenly distributed. So Marriott was happy again. Corin had thought her sense of taste would change, but it turned out she still liked potatoes. Marriott smiled, her eyes sparkling. Potatoes are always good. No matter how you cook them, they always taste great. Corin moved closer to her, making her face turn bright red. Marriott, completely embarrassed, playfully slapped him and said she was dirty and smelled mal. But what did it matter? When she had bitten into his neck, he hadn't even showered. Marriott quietly sat in a corner. She was afraid of Warren. She was really terrifying. Marriott thought she was already dead. She was scared, but she couldn't do what Corin did. You met Warren and brought out some emotion in her that made her change her mind and join the hunting practice, they told her. Warren had accidentally come across Marriott while she was training. To be able to fight against top-tier mages, Marriott had used her true power. That had angered Marriott, and the vampire within her had awakened. She couldn't understand what drove Corin to keep going. He didn't give up. Even the spirit back then was the same. People mocked him, saying he couldn't succeed. But in the end, Corin pulled it off. The image of him in Marriott's mind was truly impressive. None of that really seemed to stand out to him, though. Corin likes happy endings. Good people get rewarded, and bad people get punished. It's like one of those emotional cautionary tales. To him, she was a good person. She was really kind and incredibly beautiful. Overall, he liked happy endings. Corin really wanted Marriott to be happy. Hearing those words, she blushed deeply and awkwardly said she needed to take a shower and finish eating the potatoes. After gently sending Corin away, he happily agreed and promised to see her later. Marriott smiled, silently thanking him for comforting her, but she wasn't sure if she had the right to feel happy anymore. Marriott was going to be temporarily confined because of what had happened, and it felt like it would be hard to return to normal so soon. Corin thought she would be released soon since the half-human Warren would be attending school normally. Even if Marriott awakened and became a vampire, most people wouldn't feel threatened by it. Suddenly, the president wanted to speak with him privately, which left Corin feeling a little uneasy. The president wanted to talk about Marriott's punishment. Corin was shocked to hear that she would be punished. He hadn't thought that would happen. So, things weren't going to end the way he hoped. He quickly wanted to explain, but her punishment had already been decided. Still, he felt the need to say something as someone who had truly fought alongside her. What kind of punishment could be decided so quickly? He asked. The president smiled at Corin's intense reaction and replied, "Don't worry, there's no punishment. I also don't think she's dangerous, so I wanted to see the reaction of someone who actually fought with her. Now, I have no doubts about my decision. Don't worry, she'll release soon. We just need to confirm her stability. I've heard other students talk about it, but I'm really curious to hear the details. Even if it's simple, you explain it to me." Corin let out a relieved sigh. He had shared everything that needed to be revealed, that Marriott was completely safe, and that the child wasn't a monster. He wasn't sure how much the man believed, but Corin had made his stance clear. The chairman listened to the story and fell into a thoughtful silence. As for this matter, they'll have to make an official announcement. Of course, they won't disclose everything. After hearing the details, the chairman was about to leave. He lowered his head, offering an apology and thanking Corin for helping them prevent the dangers caused by the adults' lack of experience and overconfidence. "If you ever need anything, I'll do my best to repay you." Corin silently thought to himself that Chairman Iryu Kasar of the Academy was a person of great value. He was someone who always knew his own weaknesses and took on more responsibility because of it. Remembering the words he had said in his past life, Corin believed the man had good intentions. He happily requested that the chairman lift his head. On this side, Marriott sat quietly by herself, lost in thought, remembering the moment Corin held her close. Her rational mind, which had vanished, was swept away by waves of emotion. When she managed to push the cold monster inside her out and reclaim her humanity, all she could do was apologize. Marriott's head ached as she thought about those apologies. She wondered what right did she have to ask for one? Was Isabel safe? Because she cared for everyone so much, guilt had eaten away at her. That's why Marriott didn't resist Professor Josephine's magic, instead accepting it. After that, she locked herself behind iron bars. When Corin visited, she pretended to be someone else. But in truth, she was exhausted. She was a monster, a demon, the enemy of humanity capable of draining blood at any moment. However, one sentence, "I just want you to be happy," from him made all her worries disappear. That was the most sincere thing she had ever heard. It reminded her of the image of him throwing himself into danger to save her. He, who had turned into a monster. That powerful moment, his sacrifice and sincerity made Mariette realize that part of her life would forever remain in her memories. A week after Mariette's accident, people were still talking about it because those jerks had revealed that she was at the school. But since the half-blood Warren had quietly enrolled, the whole thing was quickly forgotten. Corin was really surprised when they said that she was still locked up. It had been a week already, and on paper, she was supposed to be free. Mariette Dunalef had been released. Everyone congratulated her, saying how special she had become. But Isabel wasn't here. That did mean she had been released. Mariette sank back into her thoughts. She probably hated me, right? She must be terrified of me. If I were her, I wouldn't want a friend who sucks my blood either. I don't want to get in anyone's way, especially Isabel's. Maybe I should just disappear from this academy. A sudden knock on the door interrupted her train of thought. She wondered who could be here at this hour. The door opened and it was Isabel. She rushed over and hugged Mariette, crying. "Are you okay? How are you feeling?" Mariette was taken aback seeing her friend like this. She wondered why Isabel wasn't afraid of her. Isabel just smiled and said, "I saw everything before I passed out." The face of her friend after she bit her, the face of someone who didn't know what to do and felt guilty. But no matter what happened, they would always be friends. So, no matter what, I want you to always consider me your friend. Mariette felt like a heavy weight had been lifted from her heart. She broke down in tears, crying like a child. And here she was thinking Isabel would hate her. In truth, Isabel was already feeling much better. However, she wasn't discharged yet, so she couldn't leave right after Mariette was freed. If it hadn't been for a junior sneaking her out, the junior she was referring to was Corin. He believed a girl like Mariette Dunalef wouldn't let herself fall apart after this accident. Mariette blushed, embarrassed to realize that she had been helped by him again. That's where the first part of the story ends. Everyone ended up with a happy ending, something that never happened in the past life. Even though there were a few unexpected twists and nothing went according to plan, Corin actually preferred this outcome. Even without a player, the world kept moving forward. Things didn't go as planned, but they still turned out well in the end. This moment marked the beginning of a new world. Corin's daily routine was pretty monotonous. Class, lunch, practice, dinner, practice. But he needed to get stronger. Given the events that were about to unfold with that girl, he needed to be faster. Calamity Serpent Ultimate Essence, Rising Serpent Skies, Poisonous Dragon Exit. Mariette watched Corin practice and then walked over to compliment him. "You're really working hard today and I'm just like usual, as if nothing ever happened." She brought him a lot of delicious food. Mariette happily said, "All right, since you've worked so hard, you should eat a lot. I didn't cook much, but go ahead and finish it all." Corin was excited and said he'd eat it all. However, a bit of blood leaked from his bandaged hand, which made her panic. "No, I can't. I just saw blood and I'm drooling," she thought. "I have to deal with this blood bag quickly." Fresh blood and packaged blood are a bit different in terms of freshness and taste. It's like organic food versus food with pesticides or frozen meat versus fresh meat. So, does that mean you've decided to eat frozen meat for the rest of your life? Sometimes it's okay if you drink, though. Mariette didn't get Corin's meaning. What he meant was that sometimes she could drink his blood and he'd be okay with it. Mariette blushed deeply. Corin kept teasing her. "I can regenerate, so if you're tired of packaged blood, you can always come to me. Or are you feeling hungry already?" Mariette, feeling uneasy about life and terrified of humans, replied, "Don't say things like that." She refused, not wanting to trouble him. She handed him the vial of vampire blood and said, "This might be a bit disgusting, but it's really good for your body. Vampire blood is one of the best magical ingredients out there." Corin drank it down without thinking twice. The system notification appeared. "You have consumed a level up elixir. This elixir contains special ingredients. Your aura level has increased by 1. Your maximum aura has risen by 500, and 10 points have been evenly distributed." Corin could feel the difference in his body. It didn't taste good at all, but he was sure he was stronger than in his previous life. This was perfect. With this, he could probably start talking to that girl. Elisa Arden, the direct descendant of the famous swordsmanship family Arden and a second-tier knight. Her life had changed a lot compared to before. After sensing the invisible wall between her and a fifth-tier knight, someone she met at the hunting grounds, she realized she needed to push herself harder and start making real progress. But of course, just a few minutes before she had enjoyed the delicious honey candy, Elisa Arden had been pretty lazy and unmotivated. She had no real interest in swordsmanship. Even though her sword skills were nearly at the genius level, her attitude towards learning was terrible, and she often scored below average. She was really happy to be here. She didn't have to swing a sword 10,000 times a day. The tests were only basic moves, and she didn't have to break a sweat fighting with her older siblings anymore. Plus, there was no sister. She prepared her mind to enjoy the space around her. Corin showed up, breaking her joy. "I noticed you haven't been coming to the gym lately," he said. Alisa nervously explained, "I've been really busy. I have assignments and other tasks to do." Corin eagerly invited her to join his team, knowing it would make a lot of money. Alisa was so upset she almost started crying. Why does he keep coming after me like this? In some ways, Corin became distant, making Alisa feel like he was hard to approach. When standing in front of him, she felt like her lazy habit of neglecting her talents had been exposed. The ordinary side of a genius swordsman, someone who earned his second-tier Knight Guard certificate at a young age, and the granddaughter of another genius swordsman was now clear for all to see. On top of that, Corin's methods were tough. He kept talking about the basics. Alisa thought to herself, "At my age, isn't it normal to do a cool, deadly chess move instead?" Corin continued to persuade her. Both teams will earn 2 gold coins, and the difficulty level is only 2. Alisa was dizzy just hearing it. With that much money, she could buy so many clothes and honeycomb candy. "All right, let's do it," she said. "Guess I have no self-respect when I see money." Next week, they'll be leaving, so they have to get everything ready now. Today, you're planning to take on a short-term job for 20 silver coins. Let's do it together. Again with the money. Her eyes lit up at the thought of it. Dealing with someone who's obsessed with money is so easy, she thought. This should be enough for the script. He wasn't sure, but based on his prediction, today was the day. Alisa enjoyed patrol missions on the task list. She just had to follow a set route around the city center and check if there were any problems. Monsters that came near the city were usually only 4 or 5 at most. Mid-level monsters were rare, so the chances of anything happening were very slim. The work was light, but the pay was high. Alisa didn't find it exhausting at all. Plus, she was always admired by the men around her. Compliments made her proud. When 10 monsters appeared, she quickly took them down. Nothing to it. This is easy. It's just an owlbear. What's the big deal? Just as expected from a swordswoman of the prestigious Arden sword family, she thought of the time when her whole family looked down on her. Chesh, your older sister had already reached the peak at your age. Finally, she had found the true heir of the genius Arden sword family. Ludia Arden was the greatest talent of this generation. As to the second daughter, she was just a child born out of wedlock. Her bloodline wasn't even strong enough to matter. But now, Alisa didn't care anymore. Her family looked down on her. Oh, was she really that bad? Today, the patrol mission had been completed safely and happily, as long as nothing else came up. Suddenly, a signal appeared from the patrol team up ahead, indicating that the monster nest was at least a level 2 threat. This was a magical signal that could only be seen through a special glass. It was a secret method used by the guard team. If nothing unusual happened during the patrol, the mission would end without the need to kill any monsters. However, if something unexpected occurred, everyone would need to participate in an assault. This was a level 2 monster nest found by the previous patrol, and it served as a den for wolves, gathering around a werewolf. A werewolf is a type of monster that Alisa can defeat, even if poisoned. This time, we could easily handle it. However, the real threat turned out to be a Dullahan, a level 1 monster. Alisa was shocked to see a Dullahan here. To deal with it quickly, she used Arden's technique, 1 strike kill, territory explosion, but it didn't seem to work. The werewolf dodged it easily. Its flexibility was on par with that of a creature with no backbone at all. It quickly and expertly tied her up. This creature was at least a level 1 monster. At this point, her only option was to call for Corin's help. Alisa had no sense of honor as a warrior. In a moment of desperation, Corin was still dealing with another monster. Alisa burst into tears. She had narrowly escaped death at the hands of the creature, but it was instantly blown to pieces. Alisa thanked the person who had helped her. When she saw the familiar sword, she realized who it was. The eldest daughter of the famous Arden swordsmanship family, destined to become the next heir. The strongest swordsman of her generation, the one who would follow in the footsteps of the legendary genius swordsman, was Ludia Arden, Alisa's older sister. Ludia had no idea what her sister had done to get herself into this mess. She had seen the Dullahan and still didn't back off. Why hadn't Alisa analyzed her opponent more carefully? And above all, why had she drawn her sword so recklessly? Who did she learn that from? Alisa quickly apologized, but her sister didn't accept any excuses. She questioned Alisa sharply. The consequences of your actions are entirely your responsibility. A few words won't change anything. You need to remember that it was your actions that put the soldiers who trusted you in danger. Alisa lowered her head, barely managing to whisper a soft yes. Her sister's sharp shout was enough to make her even more frightened. Straighten up. As an Arden swordsman, you must always be confident. With that, Lunia turned to Corin and said, I am the Holy Sword, the great disciple, the first female master of the Heavenly Sword, Lunia Arden. Corin introduced himself as the 8th disciple of Lanza Conant. Corin Locke, Alisa's friend. He emphasized just 3 words. Her friend, huh? He knew what she meant, but he couldn't reveal his own abilities. There were only 2 people who used a spear in this way. Besides Corin, only 2 others did. Ludia noticed that the person in front of her wasn't willing to share more, so she didn't press him further. The elite force of Arden consisted of all second-tier knights, known as the 5 Swords. They were the high-speed sword Jenny, the wave sword Lena, the dual sword Siren, the phantom Milia, and the steadfast sword May. The 5 of them reported that they had taken care of all the monsters in the area and asked if they should pursue the ones that managed to escape. They were all at the same level or higher than Elisa. Lunia ordered them not to bother with the chase. Now, let's head home. And you two, Elisa Arden. Swordsmen prefer to train in groups. They often refer to these groups as sword guilds. They follow their leader gathered together and eventually come to see themselves as a kind of sect. 60 years ago, the genius swordsman Garen pioneered a new generation of warriors. As the head of the family at the time, he began spreading martial arts schools, making the Arden family a renowned swordsman clan that represented the entire continent. At that time, in the sword village of Merkaba Arden, Ludio was also the female village chief. Her rule was authoritarian, strict, and had a touch of a mafia-like organization. This structure had been in place since its founding and continues to persist today. Elisa had to kneel and greet the village chief. I, Elisa Arden, second-level swordswoman and direct disciple of the family, respectfully greet the female village chief. Those around her couldn't understand why, even though she was a direct disciple of the family. Elisa had to kneel like that before a younger member of the family. Lunia looked through the list of tasks her younger sister had completed. Patrol duties, protecting merchants, dealing with level 4 monsters. She thought they were all nonsense, and some even involved helping out at a coffee shop. Elisa explained that task was just wearing the uniform and handing out flyers. I thought the uniform was cute. It's really beautiful. Lunia responded, my sister is so pitiful. I can't believe you used the family's guard credentials for something like that. Do you want to leave a stain on the Arden name? All these tasks are just about fighting low-level monsters, right? Do you really think that just because you're fighting those kinds of monsters, you're a hero now? Elisa, don't forget that human nature doesn't change. Hearing the sermon, Elisa lowered her head and stayed silent. After Elisa's group left, the village chief asked about Corin's background. He's just a level 5 knight, but Ludia couldn't believe it. The Merkaba trainee level test wasn't that unreliable. Corin's gaze remained fixed on Elisa the entire time. Even so, the monsters couldn't touch him at all. He fought so calmly, as if he had decades of experience. That kind of awareness and determination can only be gained by honing real-life skills. And though his spear technique seemed simple at first glance, the female swordsman standing atop Arden quickly recognized that his skill with it was pretty solid. The meeting was a bit brief, but she was quite pleased with her friend. If the young man stood by his sister, the academy had asked her to visit and exchange experiences, so she'd likely see him again. Every time Mariette, also known as Senior Potato, visited, she brought so many things. There were potato cakes, lamb, and she'd roasted lamb at least 30 times. The fresh lamb had just arrived today, and Professor Josephine had asked her to help prepare it, so she was practicing. Corin ate happily, while she lived the dull life of a vampire, getting by with frozen blood packets. Delicious, he said, feeling moved. Mariette's face lit up with joy. Next time, I'll bring beef. Do you like braised oxtail? Corin took her hand and gently replied, I love it. Her heart was probably racing. She promised to bring the braised oxtail next time for sure. Anyway, your hands are huge. Rough, muscular, strong. The hands of an energetic young man. So impressive and powerful. Just as they were enjoying their moment, the romantic atmosphere was interrupted by Isabel Mariette, who hurriedly changed the subject. They said their goodbyes and left. Women are so hard to understand, he muttered. In the previous life, for 3 whole years, he couldn't even step outside once because of that guy, Park Seo. It's true that you never know what life will throw at you. The reason he couldn't date anyone was all thanks to that jerk Park. He kept such tight control over Corin. His current friendships were pretty different from those in his past life. Every now and then, Yule would bring rare forest mushrooms. Then they head straight to the library and start studying the Alvin alphabet. Dron also came to visit him a lot, more than just as a friend. It seemed like Dron saw Corin as a useful companion. So whenever there was a tough task with a big reward, he'd suggest they team up. Suddenly, Jager and Lark turned pale with fear. Something was coming. Orin. She was here to claim the food Corin had promised her a month ago. Lark and Jager immediately bolted, running off. So the two of them went out to eat together. Since she looked a lot like a cat, Corin took her to eat fish. Warren was about to devour the fish hole, but that wouldn't show any respect for the food. After a few skilled moves, a bowl of delicious fish rice was ready. Food isn't just for eating. You have to look at it and smell it too. That's how you show respect for the meal. The weapons manufacturing process was almost done. A little ahead of schedule, but the second phase would begin soon. The start of phase 2 was the product test. Jaeger still hadn't learned a thing, and with only 10 minutes left until the exam, he was in trouble. Just like how a drowning person only figures out how to swim when it's too late. When asked about it, Corin casually responded, "I don't need to study. Not sure if this counts as cheating, but you're different from everyone else. This isn't your first time taking a test, so just hand over the top spot. The official exam begins now." Corin eagerly started reading the exam questions. If the inertia of motion x is y, what value of y is needed to achieve motion of 85z? Uh-oh. The smile quickly faded, and he stood still for 5 seconds. Crap, what does this even mean? Before long, the exam time was up. Jaeger was yawning nonstop, while Corin's sheet was completely blank. What else could be on it besides his name? Even Jaeger managed to answer a couple of questions before falling asleep. It was a disgrace he just couldn't accept. He had completely forgotten that the word study didn't even exist in his vocabulary. He was always more focused on researching and mastering specialized skills, but he knew nothing about the general knowledge of this world. Corin clenched the exam paper tightly and showed his determination. This test is nothing. There's still more to come. At the festival hall, the peak of all subjects, one of the easiest challenges in the game, the department's exam was a golden opportunity to redeem the pitiful scores from the written portion. These component tests were either created by professors in the night department or by temporary trainers brought in from outside. Each team of 15 students had to face them and show what they were capable of. Afterward, they would be evaluated and given their scores by the responsible professors. Since Corin was a fifth-year knight, the level of the trainer was bound to be nothing special. Corin grinned slyly. You'll earn extra points if you manage to beat the instructor. Confident enough to apologize before even knowing what's going to happen. But judging by everyone's reaction, it seemed like this instructor was no small fry. To Corin's surprise, it was none other than Lunia Arden. She greeted him. "Looks like we meet again," Corin mocked. Corin stammered, his mouth hanging open. "You're kidding, how is she here?" The brew practical exam for the first-year students was about to start. The special guests for today's test were swordsmanship experts from the renowned Arden Swordsmanship Academy. The 5 swords didn't think much of the students here, but there was one swordsman they needed to be cautious about. When the command, "All attack," was given, everyone charged in like a swarm of termites. Dron began to assess the situation. Even though all the opponents were high-level swordsmen, they had Elisa Arden on their side. That meant 2 second-tier fighters on their team. But it didn't look good. The 5 swords' combined attack knocked everyone back. The odds of winning weren't high. The enemies closed in, blocking the view and creating chaos on their side. Their combat experience was just too advanced, making it incredibly difficult to handle this situation. So before dealing with Dron, they needed to make sure their line of sight was clear. Suddenly, Phantomilia attacked from behind. Dron quickly dodged the ambush. Elisa, worried about Dron, got distracted. High-speed sword Jenny was now right on top of her. They were confident. There were about 10 students here, and with just 3 of them, they could clear the field. Elisa found herself in a tough spot. The viewers outside were on the edge of their seats. As expected, Arden's 5-sword technique was incredibly powerful. It was overwhelming. One by one, they took down their opponents. At this point, only Elisa and Dron were still able to resist. Dron's experience was on par with 5-sword. As the dust settled, Milia was overwhelmed by the 5 dark swords, and Dron was close to securing victory. Meanwhile, Elisa was still struggling under the weight of her opponent. Jenny looked down on her, scoffing, and thought, "Do you really consider yourself the heir to the Heavenly Peak sword with such limited ability? If this is your true strength, you won't even graduate from the academy. You'd be better off quitting and going back home to learn how to swing a sword while chasing chickens." Hearing those words, Elisa was furious. She didn't want that to be true. Even though she'd opened her eyes to the limits and the space around her, she still felt helpless against such a strong opponent. Jenny sighed in frustration. "Looks like you still have a long way to go."